I thought the badge meant I was the hero. But as I kicked open that door, everything shattered. There she was, my wife, with him, their guilt hanging in the air like smoke. My heart. It didn't just break. It exploded, taking every memory of trust with it. I'm not the man who catches criminals anymore. I'm the fool who didn't see the truth lurking in his own home. The job didn't kill me. Love did. 1725 from dispatch, crackled the radio. Liz Harrison, our main dispatcher, was on duty that day. I liked it when Liz was on dispatch instead of managing from her office. Her calm voice always caught my attention. I pressed the button on my portable radio instead of reaching for the hand mic in my car. Dispatch 25, go, I said. 25. We have a report of a possible kidnapping at 685 Front Street in Red River Falls. A caller says a 7-year-old girl was taken by her father and a woman who is with him. The caller believes they might be dangerous and could have weapons. The vehicle is described as a maroon 1998 Plymouth Voyager with Choctaw County plates, VDA64L. All personnel should be very careful when approaching them. Mason County clear at 1437. A kidnapping in Mason County. I was patrolling the southern part of the area and needed to get myself positioned to catch the suspects if they left the scene. Dispatch, 25 understands. Do we know which way they might be going? I asked. Negative, 25. Hold on for more information. A statewide Amber Alert is in effect. Details are being sent out now. Dispatch 25, got it, I replied. My name is Sean Patrick Quinn, Jr., but most people call me Patrick. I never liked Junior much, mainly because my dad and I didn't always get along. I worked as a deputy sheriff for the Mason County Sheriff's Department. I was on a routine patrol that hot August day when the Amber Alert came through. My shift was from 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., working 6 days on and 3 days off. I didn't mind working a bit more than a regular week, especially since I enjoyed having a long weekend after my shifts. I was driving along County Road Y-29, a quiet stretch of road about 15 miles south of Red River Falls. It branches off U.S. Highway 120 and leads west towards open land filled with farms and many cattle and sheep ranches. Mason County is large and not very crowded, apart from Red River Falls, and it covers nearly 2,700 square miles. I pulled my cruiser, a 2012 Ford Crown Victoria Police Interceptor, to the side of the road. I looked at the message that appeared on my laptop computer, which was mounted above my radio and the controls for my lights and siren. The laptop took up a lot of space, but the instant access I had to information about drivers, licenses, and criminal backgrounds was too useful to ignore. I could put up with a little discomfort for important details. Sure enough, the Amber Alert popped up on the screen giving me extra information. It described a 1998 maroon Plymouth Voyager with the license plate VDA64L, owned by a man named William Raymond Jackson, born on June 19, 80. He was a Caucasian man, 33 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, and weighed 220 pounds. Quite a big guy. He had brown hair, brown eyes, and a beard that was as long as his neck. I couldn't help but think, William Raymond Jackson? Billy Ray? Even his name made him sound like a troublemaker, or maybe a country singer. This man's past wasn't good. He had 2 drunk driving charges, driving without a license, several types of assault, theft by check, who writes checks anymore, second-degree theft, and possession of stolen items. He had also faced drug-related issues, with several counts of having illegal substances, and there were many public intoxication tickets. Lastly, he had 1 charge of indecent exposure, making him a registered sex offender. It was clear he had serious problems. No wonder he didn't have custody of his child, who the alert said was a 7-year-old girl. He had recent warrants for drug-related crimes which were serious and could lead to long-term prison time. Great, I thought. Just what I needed after a long shift. Trouble from a drug user. The alert mentioned his last known home was in Cherokee Flats, which was far southeast in Choctaw County, about a 2-hour drive away at normal speed. The Amber Alert was sent out at 14:39. I glanced at my watch. It showed 14:46. Dispatch, 25, I called in. 25, go ahead, came the answer. Dispatch, what time was the abduction reported? 25, the call came in at 14:32. Wow, that was just 14 minutes ago. Given how long it would take to leave Red River Falls, which was a large town with nearly 30,000 people, he might already be close to Y-29 and US 120 if he was driving fast. If he was really speeding, he could even be south of me by now. Understood, dispatch. I pressed down on the accelerator of my large Crown Vic and headed east on Y-29 toward US 120. The powerful V8 engine started up, and the back wheels held tight to the ground, leaving a pair of dark marks on the road as they finally found solid pavement. I didn't turn on my emergency lights or siren right away. My police car was clearly marked with flashing lights all around. Some officers prefer cars that are less obvious. I didn't. I want people to see I'm a police officer when they spot me. I sped up quickly and soon reached 100 miles per hour. I thought this would help me catch up to an old minivan ahead of me. After about 3 minutes, I reached the intersection of Y-29 and US 120. I stopped and looked in both directions. There was no traffic at all. The road south on US 120 was mostly straight for 5 miles before it gently curved towards the cliffs by the river. I decided to turn right and follow US 120 south, looking for a spot where I could see the highway clearly for a few miles both ways. If the kidnapper was going to take the child back to Cherokee Flats, this was likely the route. US 120 is the old highway connecting Cherokee Flats and Red River Falls. Interstate 60 is about 5 miles east and follows the river closely. The kidnapper would probably choose HWY 120, knowing that the State Patrol would be noticeable on the interstate. Drivers using their phones would likely be getting updates from the Amber Alert system. I parked my cruiser near an old gas station on the east side of the road. Just south of me was a car graveyard filled with rusty cars baking in the sun. The extra vehicles would help my cruiser blend in a bit and keep my position hidden, although I was mostly protected by the gas station. I started to doubt my choice of having a marked police car. I checked my watch again. It was 14:51. 19 minutes had passed since the kidnapping. If I was right, they would be coming by any minute now, unless they took a different route and were indeed heading back to Cherokee Flats. The Amber Alert didn't mention anything about a woman who was said to be with the abductor, and that made me uneasy. I wouldn't understand the reason for this until later. I quickly checked my equipment, worried that I might soon find myself in a tough situation. There were 6 deputies working in the county right now, along with 6 city officers patrolling in Red River Falls. I could call them for help if I needed to, but it would take time for them to arrive. I had no idea if any state troopers were nearby. I guessed they were probably on the interstate. I reached down and lightly touched my new sidearm, a shiny .40 caliber Smith & Wesson. I glanced at the barrier inside the cruiser to check that my shotgun was secured. It was a Mossberg 500, and it was safely stored right behind the front seats. In the trunk of my big Crown Victoria was my Bushmaster. .223 rifle, but I doubted I'd need it today. I kept it there just in case I faced multiple threats. My left hand absent-mindedly fiddled with my taser, tucked in on my belt. I figured my sidearm would be my first choice, especially since I needed to quickly find the little girl. I checked my belt to ensure I had 4 extra magazines ready. I had 12 rounds loaded already, which gave me a total of 60 rounds if the situation called for it. As always, I whispered a silent hope that I wouldn't need to use them. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement and looked up from my notebook. A vehicle was approaching from the north, about 2 miles away. It was hard to tell how fast it was moving at first, but it didn't seem to be speeding too much. US Highway 120 usually has a speed limit of 65 miles per hour. My radar gun picked it up about a mile away, showing it was going 71 mph, speeding but not by much. Most officers would just give a warning for that unless they saw someone going much faster. When the vehicle was half a mile away, I could see it was an older Chrysler minivan, its maroon color becoming clear as it got closer to the old gas station. My heart raced, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. It was time to act. As the minivan drove by, the driver, with a big beard, was gripping the steering wheel tightly, focused straight ahead. It seemed my plan to blend my cruiser with the surrounding area had worked well. My palms grew sweaty on the wheel, and I noticed my breathing quickening. I shifted into gear, left the gas station, and followed the minivan south on HWY 120. I didn't turn on my emergency lights yet, I slowly picked up speed to about 80 miles per hour to get closer. I eased off as I got near enough to see the plates. VDA 64L. Got it! The van looked very old. I saw that there were no hubcaps on the driver's side, and the body had a lot of rust around the wheels. The windshield had a big crack across the front. I could smell the strong scent of burning oil coming through my cruiser's air conditioning. I figured that if the minivan tried to escape, it wouldn't last long before breaking down. In the rearview mirror, I saw the driver clearly say, "Oh no!" The windows were very dark, so I couldn't tell if anyone else was inside. Tinted windows might look cool, but they're hard for police to deal with, especially at night. "Dispatch 1725, I called into my radio. 25, go ahead, she replied calmly. "Dispatch, I see the suspect's vehicle. It's heading south on US 120, just past mile marker 105. License plate confirmed VDA 64L. Requesting all units come to my location now." I was getting so excited I could hardly breathe, and I hadn't even done anything yet. "Good copy, 1725. You have eyes on the subject. Stand by for further." Now Liz just needed to call for backup. "Attention all units. 1725 has located the subject and has eyes on at this time. Subject is traveling south on Highway 120 and is south of mile marker 105. Officer in pursuit requests immediate assistance." Even in a tough situation, Liz stayed calm and steady. I wondered if the famous lawmen felt like this when facing their rivals at the OK Corral. 1725 from 1721. It was my friend Danny Larson. "Yeah, go Danny," I replied. Names are usually not used in radio traffic, but I was too excited. Danny seemed excited too. "Pat, I'm getting there as fast as I can, just south of the GM dealership. If you can keep them stopped, I'll be there in about 12 to 14 minutes. Aronson Chevrolet was a big dealership on the south side of Red River Falls, in an area with many car dealerships. Even driving fast, he was still almost 20 miles away. 1725, this is State Patrol 217. I'm just exiting I-60 at marker 77. The minivan and I were just passing mile marker 100. Danny was still 20 miles away, and the trooper was almost 30 miles off, considering the distance from the interstate to Highway 120. Other deputies and troopers were calling in, but no one was closer. The Red River Falls Police Department was sending 3 officers, too. I knew I would have to handle this on my own for at least the next 10 minutes. All I managed to say was, "Good copy, 17, 21, and 217. The driver of the minivan was anxiously looking back and forth in the mirror, keeping a close watch on me and the road ahead. I stayed about 30 feet behind the van. He knew I was there, and it was just a matter of time. There was a little 7-year-old girl inside, taken from her mother. What worried me most was not knowing who else was in the van with the driver. The van began to slow down, suggesting he might be about to stop. I had to make a move. I reached down to press the button on the console, turning on my emergency lights. I also activated my siren to signal him of my presence. The minivan pulled over but didn't move completely onto the shoulder. I kept about 30 to 35 feet back as the old van finally came to a stop. The way half of it was still on the road made me think the driver might consider escaping when I got out. I wasn't going to let that happen. I took the radio handset and pressed the button for my car's loudspeaker. "Driver, move your vehicle completely off the road and onto the gravel shoulder, now!" I saw the driver take a deep breath. He shifted the minivan back into gear and slowly moved it off to the side. "Driver, now turn off the engine, take the keys out of the ignition and drop them out of your window onto the ground." I watched as the minivan's brake lights went out. The driver dropped a set of keys from the window. He was still looking at me through the mirror, but was also clearly giving instructions to someone else in the vehicle. With the van off, I carefully moved my car forward and angled it slightly, placing one of my wheels on the pavement. This way I could keep most of my car between me and the minivan when I stepped out. I took out my Smith & Wesson, switched off the safety, and made sure my finger stayed off the trigger to avoid any mistakes. I slowly got out of my car and aimed my weapon at the vehicle. My heart raced, and I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. I held my gun with my right hand and used my left to hold the microphone. "Driver, at this time, everyone in the vehicle needs to exit through the driver's side only. I repeat, Exit from the driver's side only. As you exit, keep your hands where I can see them clearly. Once out of the vehicle, turn your back to me and raise your hands in the air." The driver's door slowly opened, and a man with a beard stepped out. He seemed to be talking to someone inside the vehicle. Those dark-tinted windows made it hard to see. He stood with the door open, turned away from me, and raised his hands. He was wearing an old, worn-out shirt, dirty blue jeans, and beat-up tennis shoes. "Driver, I repeat, everyone must exit from the driver's side." Before I could finish my command, the back window of the minivan shattered, my windshield was suddenly hit by buckshot, and a chunk of my emergency light bar on the roof was blown off. I felt a sharp pain in my hip and a hard impact on my ribs. It felt like getting hit by a linebacker. I dropped to my knee, using my cruiser to shield myself from the blasts as the person inside the van kept firing. I caught a glimpse of the bearded man clumsily reaching into his pants as he shouted and charged toward my car. He finally pulled out a large revolver and aimed it at me. He tried to fire, but it took him a moment to realize the safety was still on. He paused to fix it. At the same time, the shotgun in the van ran out of ammo. I leaned left around my door and quickly fired 2 shots from my weapon, hitting the man in the chest. To my shock, he kept coming toward me and fired his gun, hitting the protective vest I was wearing. The force knocked me back several feet, and I landed on the ground. Despite the impact, I didn't drop my weapon and fired 2 more shots, hitting him in the neck and head. He collapsed in front of my cruiser, his head hitting the front bumper. I struggled to catch my breath, first from the shock of the initial blast, and then from the follow-up. I tried to get back on my feet, forcing myself to breathe. Just as I was about to aim at the minivan again, I realized I was looking straight down the barrel of that shotgun, now being held by a thin blonde woman in the back seat who was screaming. I still couldn't see the little girl. I had no choice but to act. I fired my gun just as I heard another loud noise from her shotgun. The window of the van broke, and I wasn't sure if I had hit anyone. The screaming stopped. Suddenly, I felt intense pain on my right side, and I couldn't use my right arm anymore. My knees gave way, and I fell onto the ground. A moment later, I tasted blood and realized I was hurt badly. As I lay on the hot asphalt, looking for my gun that I had dropped, I saw a bloodied arm reach out from the driver's seat of the van and grab the keys on the ground. The arm picked up the keys and closed the door. After what felt like a long time, the van started up and drove away down the road. By the time I found my gun, the van was gone. Every part of me hurt. I didn't know where I had been injured. My protective gear did its best, but one of the shots had gotten through near my side. With my left hand, I pressed the button on my radio. "Dispatch, 1725. Officer, down, need, help, and an ambulance." The last thing I remembered was the sound of sirens getting closer. Then everything went dark. 8 days later. "Patrick? Patrick." I heard a man's voice calling from the darkness, but I didn't know who it was or where it came from. I tried to find the voice, but couldn't see anything in the thick blackness. I was somewhere, but felt nowhere at the same time. "Patrick!" the voice called again, louder this time. "Patrick, open your eyes!" I started to see a faint light. It was blurry at first, but then began to come into focus. "That's it, Patrick! You're doing great! Open your eyes, Patrick!" The light was bright, but not too bright. Soon my eyes fully opened, and I saw the face of a man who looked to be around my age with sandy blonde hair and blue eyes. He wore light blue scrubs and a white coat. The name Dr. Nathan Slattery was stitched in green above his pocket. "Yes, welcome back, Patrick." The room erupted in cheers, and I realized I was surrounded by people. "Patrick, can you hear me?" the doctor asked with clarity. I nodded but struggled to speak as my throat was sore and hurt. "It's okay, Patrick. Just listen for now. You've had a breathing tube in for the last week, which is why it's hard for you to talk. We just took the tube out, and it can make your throat feel rough. You'll feel sore for a few days, and it will take some time for your throat to feel normal again. You might be hoarse for a day or two as well," he explained. "My name is Nate Slattery, Patrick. I was the surgeon who operated on you. The people in this room are the team of doctors, nurses, and others who have been taking care of you." I looked around the room, but I could only move my head a little. My neck felt stiff. "You're going to feel stiff and sore for a while, Patrick," Dr. Slattery continued. "You've been lying in the same position for a week without moving. We'll work with you to help you get back on your feet, okay?" I nodded and whispered an, "Okay." "Great. I'm going to let you rest now, Patrick. We'll watch your condition closely for another 48 hours, especially your breathing. If you have trouble, we might need to help you more. We don't want that to happen, so hopefully you'll keep getting stronger and breathe easier on your own," Dr. Slattery said with a reassuring smile. As I looked to the sides of my hospital bed, I noticed many heart monitors and machines supplying fluids to me. It felt like there were tubes everywhere, but I was too tired to think about it, and my eyelids were getting heavy. "Get some rest now, Patrick. I'll check on you later during my rounds. But before I leave, I want to say how nice it has been to meet you and help take care of you. I see a hero when I meet one, and you are truly one," he said with a wide smile. As he finished speaking, the room echoed with applause, and one by one, everyone left my intensive care suite until only one nurse remained. She seemed focused as she checked each monitor and my IVs to make sure everything was all right. Then I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer and drifted back to sleep. I must have slept for a long time because I don't remember Dr. Slattery coming back. When I woke up, sunlight was shining into the room. A nurse wearing blue scrubs was checking my monitors and IVs while taking notes on a small computer. She noticed me looking at her while she recorded my vital signs. "Good morning," she said cheerfully with a warm smile. She looked young, probably in her early 20s, and her straight, sandy hair was tied back in a ponytail. Her face was round with dimpled cheeks, and her smile showed perfectly straight teeth. Her eyes were wide and the most beautiful I had ever seen. The color was a beautiful shade of blue, the kind you might think only existed in dreams. She looked just like the caring nurse you would hope to have when you were feeling unwell. She came closer, resting her arms on the bed's side. "How are you feeling?" she asked with a friendly smile. "I'm not sure. I think I'm okay," I replied in a soft voice, looking at the 2 IV lines connected to my left hand and arm. "At least you're talking again. How does your pain feel on a scale of 1 to 10? She asked gently. I wasn't feeling much pain at first, but when I tried to move my right arm, a sharp pain shot through my whole arm and into my neck, making me feel it in my right ear. "That really hurt!" I exclaimed. It was the worst pain I had ever felt. Tears began to fill my eyes, and I felt close to crying from the discomfort, which I hadn't done since I was a child. "Let me get a pillow to support your arm. That might help," she said, taking a pillow from the cart outside my room. Carefully, she lifted my right arm, and I braced myself for more pain. But she was so gentle that I hardly noticed. It felt like her touch could ease my discomfort. She held my right hand and asked, "Can you wiggle your fingers for me?" I tried to move my fingers. It did hurt a bit, but I could manage it. "Good! That's a very encouraging sign," she said. She placed my hand back on the pillow, and I felt a little sad that she let go. Her touch was nice. She came closer to my bedside again. Even though I was confused, I found comfort in her presence. "Dr. Slattery believes your right arm will heal completely. Dr. Sloan was the surgeon, and Dr. Slattery was very pleased with how well it went," she explained. "What happened?" I asked, my voice weak. Her expression turned serious. "Dr. Slattery said you were injured by at least 2 shots. They removed 6 large pieces from your right arm, 1 from your right lung, and 4 more from your leg. One of those pieces in your lung got close to an important artery. Another in your leg hurt a main artery. Everyone is amazed that you're still alive, Mr. Quinn," she finished. "Wow," was all I could manage to whisper. She placed her hand softly on my arm and gave it a small squeeze. "You're a fighter, Mr. Quinn. You're a hero, especially to me. People all over the state are talking about you, and you've even made it onto national news," she said with a warm smile. I was curious about what had happened. I couldn't remember the exact event, only that I was very hurt. But I was too tired at that moment to ask for more details. "I'm going to finish my notes," she said, "but I'll be right outside your room. I have 2 other patients I'm taking care of, and your rooms are next to each other, so I promise I'll always be nearby. In the meantime," she said as she picked up a big remote, "you can press the large red button on here if you need anything at all. And," she continued, "if you're feeling up to it, you can watch some TV. The TV controls are on the same pad as your nurse call button, but try not to stay awake too long. You need to rest. You still have a long way to go." I nodded to show I understood, though my throat was too sore to speak much. She leaned in and gave my arm a gentle, reassuring touch. Looking at her kind face and her bright blue eyes, I could see tears forming. "You have no idea how much it means for me to take care of you, Mr. Quinn. Please get some rest, and call if you need anything at all." She opened the sliding door to my room and went to her desk. I hadn't even asked her name. Luckily, I noticed a big board at the foot of my bed that showed today's date, the room I was in, and the names of my physician and nurse. Her name was Shannon, Nurse Shannon Sullivan, Irish, just like me. How lucky am I? I felt tired and a bit groggy, but not quite ready to sleep. I felt very alone, and I missed Shannon already, even though she was only a few feet away. I looked down at the remote and decided to turn on the TV for a bit. The clock in my room showed it was almost noon, so I thought I'd watch the news and see what was happening in the world. The television was already set to a local channel in Red River Falls, and the credits for a soap opera were rolling before the news began. The noon news started with a young man and woman at a shiny black desk. Our local station, KRFV Channel 5, was a regular starting point for news anchors. Most of them were fresh out of college and didn't stay long, often moving on to bigger jobs in other places. Many former anchors from KRFV could be seen on TV stations in cities like Minneapolis, Omaha, Kansas City, Denver, and others across the Midwest. Female anchor: "Good day and welcome to Channel 5 News at Noon. I'm Heather Gilchrist." Male anchor: "And I'm Dave Conroy." We begin our broadcast with some exciting news from Holy Family Regional Medical Center in Red River Falls. Doctors and hospital staff report that Deputy Sheriff Sean Patrick Quinn, who was involved in stopping an attempted kidnapping, has come out of his medically induced coma. He is now awake, talking, and breathing on his own. The female news anchor said, "You'll remember that Deputy Quinn was the first officer to respond to the Amber Alert more than a week ago. He spotted the van involved in the attempted abduction of 7-year-old Bridget Sullivan." The screen briefly showed video of the crime scene, including Deputy Quinn's police car, which looked heavily damaged. Deputy Quinn stopped the minivan and encountered the driver, 33-year-old William Raymond Jackson, and his accomplice, 31-year-old Kimberly Amber Trenton, both from Cherokee Flats. The male news anchor explained, "Jackson is the non-custodial father of Sullivan. Sullivan's mother has a restraining order against him, and a judge took away his parental rights nearly 6 years ago. Authorities think Jackson may have taken Sullivan to avoid legal trouble and possibly flee to Mexico." The female anchor continued. As Deputy Quinn approached the vehicle, he faced both suspects and was shot multiple times. Despite his injuries, Quinn was able to return fire, which led to Jackson's death at the scene and left Trenton seriously hurt. Trenton tried to get away but was found unconscious behind the wheel of the minivan, which had landed in a shallow ditch about a mile from where the incident happened. A state trooper, who had been called to help, discovered the van. Sadly, attempts to revive Trenton were not successful. The male anchor added, Bridget Sullivan was found safe, lying on the floor of the minivan between the front and middle seats with her arms and legs secured. She was unharmed and was later returned to her mother, Shannon Sullivan, who works as a nurse at Holy Family. An ambulance returning from another call was in the area, and the paramedics provided emergency care that doctors credit with helping to save Deputy Quinn's life. The video ended, and the camera returned to the two anchors in the studio. The female anchor said, "Throughout the week, family, friends, and supporters of Deputy Quinn have gathered at Holy Family waiting for encouraging news, which finally came today. Doctors have updated Deputy Quinn's condition to critical but stable, meaning he is still receiving the best care but is showing signs of improvement. News Channel 5 will keep you updated on this story as it develops." The news went on to cover a local story about a bank teller in Red River Falls facing embezzlement charges. I didn't really care and pressed the button to turn off the TV. The images from that day flooded back into my mind. I was taken aback by the sight of the large pool of blood, my blood, on the ground next to the open door of my car. My once proud vehicle was so damaged from the shotgun blasts that it looked like it had gone through a swarm of insects. I couldn't understand why I was still alive. I felt a sense of guilt, knowing that others had suffered more serious injuries and didn't make it. All I could do was be grateful that I survived for my wife and boys. Most importantly, I thanked God that the little girl, Bridget, was safe. Even though I had fired my weapon blindly, it seemed I had somehow managed to stop both suspects. Then it hit me. Since waking up the day before, I hadn't seen my wife Clarissa or my two boys, Nicholas and Jacob. I reached down and pressed the nurse call button. Shannon appeared at my side right away, concern on her face as she hurried into the room. "Are you okay? Is something wrong or do you need anything?" she asked. In a hoarse voice, I managed to ask, "Where is my family?" The worried look on Shannon's face turned into one of hesitation. "Well," she began, "Mrs. Quinn thinks you need your rest, and she'll come see you when you're feeling better." "I don't understand," I said, trying to express my confusion. How could my wife not be here when I needed her most? Suddenly, I felt a wave of anger and sadness. Shannon took my left hand and held it tightly with both of hers. "I think Mrs. Quinn just wants you to heal," she said gently. "She might not want your boys to see you like this. She probably wants them to visit when you're feeling better," she added, giving a hint of hope. I squeezed Shannon's hands lightly and managed a small smile, even though I knew she could see my pain. I looked away, but I noticed the kindness in her eyes. "But to make you feel a little better," she said, "I just heard from Dr. Slattery. If your latest tests come back okay this afternoon, you'll be moved to a regular room." I smiled again and said, "Thank you. Get some rest, Patrick. I'll be right here if you need anything." She started to leave, but I still held her hand. For one, it felt nice, and two, I wanted to say something. "Yes, Patrick? Is there something else?" she asked. "Don't call me Mr. Quinn. Just call me Patrick, please," I said with some effort. Shannon smiled at me again, squeezed my hand, and replied, "Okay, Patrick. Now, get some rest." That afternoon, my blood test results showed I was getting better. I still had a couple of infections, one in my right leg and the other in my right arm. Thankfully, I was managing to stay free of pneumonia, which worried me a lot due to my lung injuries. I still had a chest tube in my right lung, which was uncomfortable. But what bothered me the most was the catheter. It made me feel a bit embarrassed, though I couldn't quite explain why. I guess I just felt like some things should be done on my own. Shannon informed me I wouldn't be moved from intensive care until the next morning. She was glad about that because it meant she could care for me a little longer. I learned later that she had worked hard to stay with me, taking extra shifts each day. The surgery I underwent lasted 16 hours and involved many people, including 9 doctors. Shannon's shift ended at 7 p.m. She knew I would likely be in another room by the time she returned the next morning, probably before breakfast. That evening, she came into my room at 6 p.m. with a cart that had a bowl of warm water and some washcloths. "Since you're feeling a bit better, I thought I would help you freshen up before you move to your new room," she said. I had gained some strength during the day, and my throat hurt less, mostly because Shannon let me drink some water and juice through a straw instead of only using IV fluids. "You mean like a wash?" I asked. "More or less," she replied. "We won't use sponges, just cloths and towels. I'll be careful around your bandages on your arm and leg and also your chest tube. Depending on your chest x-ray tomorrow, that might come out too." Shannon was about to help me adjust my gown for the wash, and I felt a bit nervous, as it meant showing more than I was comfortable with. I tried to focus on being grateful for her care instead of feeling anxious. I've always been a bit self-conscious, especially since high school when I opened up about my insecurities to a friend named Kathy. Her response had a lasting effect on me and changed how I felt during those kinds of moments. After that, college felt like a new beginning for me, and I was eager to do things differently this time. I really liked Shannon and wanted to impress her. Shannon?" "Yes, Patrick," she said as she got ready to help me clean up. "Do you have a towel I could use, just to cover up a bit?" Shannon paused before answering, "Well, Patrick, I need to make sure you are clean. It's important for your recovery." "Oh, I guess you're right," I said, feeling a bit shy. "I suppose you've already seen a lot anyway." Shannon smiled while staying professional. With care, she adjusted the bedsheet to make me comfortable as she began washing me from my head down. She had placed a "Do Not Enter" sign on the door and closed the curtains around my bed. Dipping a cloth in warm, soapy water, she gently wiped around my left ear and neck, then continued down my upper body. The warm water made me feel relaxed and refreshed. For the first time in a week, she helped me sit up and carefully washed my back, being gentle around my healing spots. It took her about 15 minutes to finish washing my upper body. "Okay, Patrick, we're done with your upper body. Now let's wash from the waist down. I'll start with your feet." She took the warm cloth and carefully washed the bottoms of my feet, making sure to clean between my toes. Shannon looked peaceful and dedicated, focused on her job to care for her patients. As she worked her way up my legs, gently rubbing my muscles, I was surprised at how stiff I felt after lying mostly still for over a week. She carefully washed up to my thighs, being careful around my healing spots. But when she took a moment to clean me, I started to feel uneasy. Shannon, I think I need you to stop," I said, feeling tense. "It's okay, Patrick. I'm almost done." Fortunately, the discomfort from the medical equipment kept me from relaxing fully, and I tried to manage my feelings. "There we go," she said happily. "You're all clean now." Shannon then called in a nursing assistant named Bonnie to help change the sheets, which was not easy with me still in the bed. Once they finished, Shannon's shift was almost over. She needed to give her report to the next nurse before heading home to her daughter. Shannon came back to say goodbye and wish me a good night. She had tears in her eyes. "I want you to know how special it has been for me to take care of you, Patrick. This meant a lot to me. I feel like I owe you so much for bringing my daughter back to me," she said, her voice shaking. "Thank you for looking after me so well," I replied, my voice hoarse. "I'll come by to check on you in your new room to make sure they are taking good care of you," she continued, trying to hold back her tears. "I want to make sure my friends on the med-surg floor are keeping a close eye on you." "I'm sure they will," I said. "Good night, Patrick. Rest well," Shannon said. She turned, opened the curtains, and then the sliding glass door to my room. She paused at the door, gave me one last look, shared a kind but sad smile, and then left the intensive care unit. At 6 a.m., a few nurses came in, including my overnight nurse, Tina. She took me to my new room on the med-surg floor, where patients stay for medical care or to recover from surgery. My new nurse, Brian, was friendly and easy to talk to. He was assisted by a nursing helper named Cherie, who took my vital signs and checked my temperature. Around 10 a.m., my wife Clarissa finally arrived to see me, though the boys were not with her. I told her it was great to see her and that I missed her. I asked why she hadn't come to visit sooner. "What do you mean?" she asked, sounding annoyed. "I spent most of the first week here. I waited a long time while you were in surgery for over 16 hours. Do you think I've been ignoring you?" "Well, no," I replied. "But I woke up 2 days ago and I didn't see you until now. I was just feeling a bit lonely and wondering where you were." "No one has been ignoring you, Patrick. I didn't want the boys to see you like this," Clarissa said as she settled in. "Also, we've all been dealing with allergies, and I didn't want to risk us getting more sick. I was still too weak to argue much. We spent the next hour with the doctors discussing my recovery. Dr. Slattery and Dr. Morgenstern, who would be in charge of my care, talked with Clarissa and me about my treatment and when I might be able to go home. The good news was that I was healing, and Dr. Morgenstern thought I might be able to leave in about 4 to 6 weeks. The not-so-good news was that I would be in the hospital a while longer. It felt like I was stuck in one place forever. After about 2 hours, Clarissa said she needed to get home and would come back tomorrow. "Really? You're leaving already? You haven't been here long," I said, hoping she'd stay a bit longer. "I've been here for over 2 hours, Patrick. I need to get home to clean and get ready for the boys. They'll be hungry when they get back from school. Plus, I have to feed the horses, the calves, and all the other animals. I can't stay forever," she replied while putting on her jacket. I was confused about why Clarissa seemed so distant. I thought she would be happier to see her husband doing better. Instead, she acted like a regular visitor. "Okay," I said, feeling down. "Please tell the boys I love them and can't wait to see them. Maybe you can bring them by tomorrow. I really miss them." "You've already gone over a week without seeing them. 1 more day or 2 isn't going to hurt," she said patiently. "We have to think about how this is affecting them too. I'll see you tomorrow." She gently touched my forehead and then left the room. Just like that, she was gone. I started to breathe quickly. My chest hurt, and I felt like I might cry. My heart was racing, and soon my nurse Brian came in to check on me. "I'm okay," I told him. "I just really miss my kids." I couldn't believe how distant Clarissa was. If she had been the one who needed help, nothing could have pulled me away from her. Over the years, we had gone through many ups and downs, especially since I started working at the sheriff's department. Moving to the sheriff's department from the Red River Falls PD had been good for us, allowing us to buy a small 10-acre place in the county. Clarissa had been dealing with a health issue that affected our relationship. She could have followed her doctor's advice and taken medication that would help. Instead, she always chose herbal remedies that didn't work as well. After many arguments, I decided that any closeness with Clarissa, even if it was rare, was better than risking a divorce and having our boys grow up in two different homes. So we continued on, with her doing her own thing while I tried to cope with the growing distance between us. I can hardly count on one hand how many times Clarissa and I have connected over the past year. The only good time we had together was almost 2 years ago, shortly after I started my job as a deputy. Things were tough between Clarissa and me back then. My mother-in-law, Caroline, was dealing with her own challenges, having just gone through her third divorce. One day, while we were working on our land together, Caroline and I formed a surprising bond. We supported each other emotionally during a hard time in our lives, but just as quickly as it began, that connection faded when Caroline met someone new and moved to the Twin Cities. We saw her less and less after that. I often think about her and what we shared during that time. On the rare occasions when Clarissa and I have a close moment, I feel a bit guilty that my mind often drifts elsewhere. This has left me with a small sense of guilt. I wasn't entirely careless about straying from my marriage, even if it was just for a moment. But my guilt has lessened over the past year, especially because I have felt pushed away by Clarissa. Instead, feelings of anger, jealousy, and confusion have taken root. I sometimes find myself wondering if she might be unfaithful. I never thought that could happen since Clarissa was a stay-at-home mom. Until this year, she had been homeschooling our 2 boys. However, now that they are older, they wanted to attend public school with their friends. I dislike the long bus ride they have to take to get to school in Red River Falls, but they seem happy, and their happiness means the most to me and Clarissa. The next day, Brian happily told me he would come by to remove my catheter. I felt a huge relief at the thought of getting rid of that discomfort. Clarissa didn't get to the hospital until nearly dinner time. I tried calling home several times but couldn't reach her. When she arrived, she brought the best surprise. The boys, Nick and Jake, rushed to me, shouting, "Dad!" Clarissa kindly reminded them to be gentle since I still had some injuries healing. They hugged me carefully, being mindful of my IV and other medical equipment. I hoped my chest tube would be taken out the next day. For 2 hours, the boys excitedly shared stories about their friends, school, sports, and my recent experiences. They told me their friends admired me and thought it was great that I acted quickly in a tough situation. That really hit home for me. Even though I felt relieved that little Bridget was okay, I still struggled with the weight of my actions. Knowing my boys were proud of me made me feel happy inside. I found comfort in knowing that my experiences had some value for my kids, especially Nick, who was adjusting to being a new student in junior high. Even though more families are choosing to homeschool, there's still a bit of an awkward feeling about it here in Mason County. Anything I could do to keep a bully away from my children was worth it. If it meant facing some troublemakers myself, then that was fine. At 7 p.m., Clarissa said, "All right, boys, it's time to go home. Say goodnight to Dad, and you'll see him again soon." The boys complained, wanting to stay a little longer, but my wife firmly replied, "No, grab your things so we can leave. It's a school night, and you both have homework." I hugged both boys tightly with my good arm and told them to visit me soon. Before she left, Clarissa turned to me and asked, "Do you need anything before I come back?" "Well," I said with a small smile, "they took my catheter out today. Maybe you could come back later after visiting hours?" "Oh, come on," she replied a bit loudly. "Is that all you think about, even when you're not well?" "The answer is no, I won't be coming back tonight. But if you really need something, I can bring it tomorrow." Okay, just keep it down." I was sure everyone in the hallway heard her. "If you want to bring me something, I'd love some good toothpaste and a toothbrush. These pain meds make me sleepy and my mouth feels awful." "Thanks for the lovely update. I'll stop at the supermarket on the way home and bring it tomorrow. For now," she said, leaning over, "I'll say goodnight with a kiss on your forehead." I tried to move for a proper kiss, but I wasn't quick enough lying in bed, and just like that she was gone. I didn't have much time to feel sorry for myself, thankfully, because as soon as Clarissa and the boys left, I had a surprise visitor. "Hey, look who it is! You're looking better already!" Shannon appeared in my doorway. It was great to see her. "Hi there," I said. "What's the surprise?" "I promised I'd come check on you. I need to see how my buddy Brian is taking care of my hero," she said with a bright smile. I felt a bit shy. "I'm no hero," I said modestly. Hello?" Shannon responded as she put down her backpack and sat in the chair beside my bed. "You're the man who saved my daughter's life and made sure she is safe." Suddenly, Brian poked his head in the doorway, looking worried. "Everything okay?" he asked as he moved toward my heart monitor. "Your heart rate just went from about 70 to 130 a minute ago." I felt my face heat up, and I struggled to breathe. Shannon looked away, blushing and smiling. Brian stood there, trying to figure out the sudden awkwardness. He said, "I guess everything is okay now. So I'll head back to my station. Just press the button if you need anything, all right?" I nodded, and Brian left the room, a little shy. Shannon kept smiling and looked down while I tried to find the right words that wouldn't sound too silly. "Sorry," I said quietly, feeling embarrassed. "You surprised me when you showed up like that. Must have caught me off guard," I admitted, trying to sound more confident. "Right," Shannon replied, nodding and mustering the courage to look me in the eyes again. "I can be a bit intimidating sometimes," she joked, smiling. She had a wonderful laugh. I couldn't help but like her even more, and she seemed to notice. Not even my wife's presence felt as exciting as when Shannon came in. "So, I wanted to ask you something," Shannon said, changing the subject. "Would it be okay if I brought my little girl by one evening to say hello? She really wants to meet her hero, her words, not mine, and I promised I would ask you first," she said eagerly. I was surprised by her question and quickly replied, "Of course. I would love to meet her. I've been looking forward to it and making sure she's okay. Since I got out of intensive care, I've been having some troubling dreams about your daughter." "Oh my goodness," Shannon said, placing her hand on my shoulder. "That's terrible. You might be feeling stressed about everything, and the medicine can make it worse." That was true. Since waking up a few days ago, I'd been having restless sleep, haunted by memories of what happened on the highway. It was taking over my thoughts, especially when I was alone. We talked for a little while longer until Shannon had to leave to get back to her daughter. She said she would check on me again after her shift tomorrow and would bring Bridget by soon. I told her I would really enjoy that and looked forward to the visit. The next week passed a bit faster. They took me to the operating room to remove the chest tube that had been sticking out of my side. My chest was still a bit sore, but I was relieved not to have that big tube attached to me anymore. My nurse, Brian, and his assistant, Cherie, helped me get out of bed and took me for walks up and down the hospital hallway for about 20 to 30 minutes. I still had some trouble moving my right arm, but I could at least stand on my right leg and walk slowly. By the end of the week, I could even lift a small glass of juice with my right hand. This was a big step for me since my right arm had been hurt quite badly. Clarissa and the boys had visited me a few times, but never 2 days in a row. I could tell the boys missed me and often asked their mom if they could come see me every day. Clarissa always replied, "We'll see," but they hadn't come on consecutive days yet. Shannon had some days off from work, and on that Sunday evening, at the end of my 3rd week in the hospital, she surprised me by bringing a special visitor. "Knock, knock," I heard as they walked into the room. I was watching TV and turned to see Shannon with her daughter. It was heartwarming to see them together, and I noticed they looked a lot alike. "Well, hello there," I said, smiling and trying to look charming. "Bridget, this is Patrick. He helped you the day you were taken from me," Shannon told her. I expected Bridget to be quite young and perhaps still scared. Instead, she looked like a bright and cheerful young lady. "Hi, Patrick. It is so nice to meet you," she said with a big smile. I sat up a bit to look more presentable. "Hello, Bridget. It's really nice to meet you, too," I replied, smiling back. She was lively and friendly, much more outgoing than many kids are around new people. "I have something for you," Bridget said excitedly. "I made a picture for you. Can I give it to you?" "Of course, I can't wait to see it." Bridget handed me a colorful drawing of me wearing a green sheriff hat and a big star badge. In the picture, I was holding hands with a girl dressed in the same colors as Bridget. "It's a picture of you and me, Patrick. You can put it on the wall so you can see it all the time, she said proudly. Absolutely. I want it to be the first thing I see in the morning. Thank you so much, Bridget. You are a very talented artist, I praised her. Bridget beamed with happiness. We chatted for about half an hour until my weekend nurse, Tanya, came in to let me know it was time for my evening walk. Shannon was getting ready to take Bridget and herself home for the night, but I spoke up before they could leave. Bridget, I'd love to get some exercise tonight. I usually use a cane or walker, but I think I can walk pretty well if I have someone to hold on to. Would you like to walk with me? Bridget's face lit up with joy. Of course, Patrick. I'll make sure you don't fall, she said with enthusiasm. Phew, I said, pretending to wipe my forehead. That's a relief. Now I feel less nervous. Tanya guided us into the hallway. I held onto the rail with my left hand and Bridget's hand with my right. Be gentle with Patrick's hand, Bridget. That arm had a tough time, Shannon reminded her daughter. I will, Mom, I promise, Bridget replied cheerfully. We walked and talked for about 20 minutes, going up and down the hall. Bridget looked so happy to be helping me. She felt important, and I found it remarkable how confident she was for someone so young. Shannon walked behind us or stopped to chat with other people in the area. She kept an eye on us, smiling occasionally. I thought she was being a caring mom, but I also sensed she was making sure both I and my nurse, Tanya, were okay. It seemed like once a nurse took care of you, you would always be their patient, much like how your favorite teacher remains your teacher no matter where you go. By the end of our walk, I felt tired, but even Tanya was impressed with how well I did. I credited all my success to Bridget, and she happily accepted the praise. I returned to my room feeling grateful for the company. As Tanya helped me back into bed, I wished our walk could have lasted longer. Well, Pumpkin, Shannon said, running her fingers through Bridget's hair, we should head home now and let Patrick rest. You did a great job helping him tonight. I'm proud of you, she said, smiling at me. I'll come back to walk with you again, Patrick, and help you get better, Bridget said seriously. That would be wonderful. I can't wait, I replied. Bridget then gave me the biggest, tightest hug I ever remember getting from a small child. A warm look spread across Shannon's face, and I noticed her eyes glimmering. She silently mouthed thank you to me, and I returned the gesture. I work 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. tomorrow. I'll try to come by when I can, okay? Shannon said as she got ready to leave. I'd like that, I replied. Okay, she said. I'll see you tomorrow. Bridget smiled and waved, and Shannon gave me one last look before they left the room. I settled back in bed and turned on the TV, hoping to feel sleepy again. My mind kept wandering back to my time with Bridget and how comfortable I felt around her and her mother. I didn't know exactly why, but they had both found a way into my heart, and I felt certain I'd be a part of their lives in some way from now on. I was in such a good mood that it took me a while to realize I wasn't even upset that Clarissa hadn't visited me that day. Spending time with little Bridget made me miss my sons, and I felt a bit unhappy that I hadn't seen them. It was Sunday, and Clarissa usually took the boys to Mass at St. Matthew's. Since the church was just a short walk from the hospital, I thought it would have been easy for them to come and see me afterward. I picked up the phone to call home so I could at least talk with the boys for a bit. My son Nick answered, and we chatted for about 20 minutes. Then he handed the phone to my youngest son Jacob, who wasn't much for talking yet. When I finished with Jacob, Nick came back on the line. Is your mom around? I asked Nick. She's here, but she's on the computer. She told me not to bother her, Nick replied. How long until she's done? I wondered. Nick took a moment to think. I'm not sure. She's been at it for a couple of hours, he said. Can you let her know I called and would like to talk to her? I asked. Okay, he said. He put the phone down for a moment. A few minutes later, he came back and said, Mom said she's busy and that I should keep talking to you. She said she'll see you tomorrow. I could feel my frustration rising again. I was tired of this situation, and if it kept happening, we would need to have a serious talk. After saying goodbye to Nick and Jacob, I hung up. Instead of sleeping, I spent the rest of the night flipping through TV channels and trying to figure out what I would say to Clarissa when she came to see me at the hospital next. I finally fell asleep around 3 or 4 in the morning, despite several gentle reminders from my nurse about resting instead of watching TV. I offered a few weak excuses, but I think she could sense something was bothering me. She was kind enough to let it drop and not push further. I slept for a few hours and was soon awakened by Brian entering my room around 10 o'clock. "You've got a visitor," he said. To my surprise, it was my boss, William Bud Roberts, sheriff of Mason County. Bud and I had worked together years ago at Red River Falls Police Department. A few years after he became sheriff, Bud encouraged me to apply for a job as a deputy. He said it would allow Clarissa and me to move out of Red River Falls to a bigger place, which we had always wanted. "Well, look who it is!" Bud shouted as he entered my room. "Bud, it's great to see you, even if you look a bit rough," I joked. "Yeah, not all of us can look as good as you on TV, superstar," he replied with a friendly pat on my shoulder. Bud had a strong presence. He was about my size, but had a strong political side, which probably helped him get elected sheriff. He was around 16 years older than me, fit for his age, with a bit of extra weight showing his 53 years. His hair was neatly styled, with a perfect part, making him look more like a news anchor than a sheriff. He liked to wear a suit and tie, with his badge on his belt and pins on his lapel, one for the American flag and another for his badge. Bud's expression changed to one of concern for a moment. "How are you doing in here?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "Things are going pretty well. I'm starting physical therapy on my arm tomorrow. I've already regained a lot of movement that I thought would take a while to come back. So I'm hopeful I'll be out of here in a couple of weeks." "I'm glad to hear that," Bud said, smiling. "Everyone at the law center is proud of you. We've all been thinking about you. The sheriff's office has looked like a flower shop with all the plants and flowers people have brought." "Not like my room?" I said, looking around and laughing. My hospital room looked quite cheerful with all the thoughtful gifts. Bud and I spent the next 45 minutes talking, and he updated me on the investigation. He informed me that the Department of Criminal Investigation had cleared me and confirmed everything was within the law. There were some questions about my choices during the initial stages, but the video from my car's camera showed that the minivan was slowing down, which suggested that the driver wanted a confrontation. Because of that, I had to act. As for the situation with the woman, it was also deemed acceptable. I couldn't figure out where Bridget was at the moment, but I had to protect myself from a person who was clearly not in their right mind and was holding a shotgun. I tried my best to see who it was, and what I found out was clearer than I could have imagined. Bud and I chatted a bit longer. He told me that I had started my 30-day leave since the incident. All that time would be spent in the hospital, but I would still receive my full pay and benefits. "Is there anything else you need me to do while you're here?" Bud asked as he got ready to leave. I said I couldn't think of anything. Just before he walked out, he paused and asked one last thing. "How's your family handling all of this?" I leaned back in my bed and let out a long sigh. "The boys are doing fine. They're looking forward to seeing me and don't understand why they can't visit more." "And what about Clarissa?" he pressed. "Clarissa, it's been harder for us," I admitted. It felt good to say it out loud. Bud moved his chair closer to me. "Go on," he encouraged. I shared my feelings about the distance between us, the annoying comments, and how she seemed uninterested in me since the incident. I ended up talking for almost 45 minutes. Bud listened carefully, taking in everything I had to say. When I finished, he looked down for a moment before speaking. "You know," he started slowly, "being married to someone in law enforcement isn't easy, no matter where they work. I get that it's really tough for you with everything happening. But you also need to think about what Clarissa is going through. Suddenly, she was faced with raising 2 boys alone and taking care of the farm while trying to provide for them. And I could keep listing things. It must have been a lot for her to handle, Pat." I nodded thoughtfully. Bud had a point, but I felt there was more going on. "I see what you're saying, Bud. I really do. But some things just don't fit anymore. Things from before everything changed. It hasn't felt right for a long time, and I'm not sure how to fix it." Bud stood up from his chair and came closer to me for a moment before saying anything. "I'm not a relationship expert, that's for sure," he said seriously. "Like I said, it's tough being the partner of a police officer wherever you are." He placed a hand on my shoulder and looked me in the eye. "Even if you don't like what I'm about to say, I'll say it anyway. Some people just aren't cut out to be married to someone in this line of work. And that's nobody's fault either. His words weighed heavily on me, filled with a lot of truth. If things were so tense between Clarissa and me now, especially when I needed her most, how much worse would it be when I left the hospital and got back to my life? You know, Bud said as he turned by the doorway, Floyd Franklin put in his retirement request last week. I hadn't had a chance to mention it earlier. With your qualifications and background, I think you should apply for his job when you're ready. Floyd was retiring? That surprised me. He was a captain and chief deputy, next in line after the sheriff. His position meant a regular daytime schedule, Monday through Friday, and no more patrols. For Clarissa, it would mean not worrying about me making traffic stops and chasing after people like I used to. Wow, I mean, yes, Bud, I'll definitely think about it. The idea of becoming captain and chief deputy brought me hope that I could share some good news with Clarissa and maybe start to fix our relationship. Sounds good, Pat. Take care, and I'll visit again soon, okay? He gave me a comforting pat on the shoulder and left. The next few weeks were tough as I began my daily physical therapy sessions, spending about 6 hours each day working hard. It was painful and tiring, but it was worth it. I made great progress, helped by the fact that I was in good shape and regularly exercised at our gym with the Red River Falls PD. Soon, I regained about 60% of the strength in my right arm and started walking normally again. I even jogged on the treadmill for about 20 minutes. I wasn't setting any records, but I was doing much better than my medical team expected after the incident. Clarissa frustrated me with her irregular visits. Too often she didn't bring the boys, and I was only getting to see them 2 or 3 times a week. I hoped and prayed to finally hear that I could go home so I could spend time with my boys and figure out why my marriage seemed to be struggling. Shannon, however, became a bright spot during this time. She visited almost every night after her shift in the ICU ended. She also brought Bridget to see me at least twice a week when Shannon wasn't working. Besides my boys, I looked forward to seeing Shannon and Bridget more than Clarissa. Their visits were always pleasant and never led to arguments. Finally, Dr. Slattery gave me the news I had been waiting for. I was going home. It was a Friday afternoon, and I would leave the next morning. I couldn't wait to share this good news with Clarissa, Nick, and Jake. When they arrived after school, the boys were thrilled. As for Clarissa, not really. "Oh, no!" Clarissa exclaimed when she heard the news. "Why? I thought you'd be happy," I said. "The house is a complete mess right now, Patrick. I have so much to do before you come home, laundry to do and groceries to pick up. I hoped they would tell us better when you could leave," she replied, sounding upset. "Who cares what the house looks like? I'm just so happy to finally come home to my family." Clarissa sighed deeply. "Boys, why don't you go wait in the other room and watch TV for a bit?" "Okay, Mom," Nick said, both boys knowing a serious talk was about to happen. Clarissa stood with her arms crossed while I sat on the edge of the bed. "Is there any chance they could let you go tomorrow afternoon or maybe Sunday?" she asked. I was surprised and blinked a few times. "What's going on?" I asked. "Why aren't you looking forward to me being home? What's really happening?" I could see her holding back tears as she spoke. "You know, life doesn't just stop because you're in the hospital, Patrick," she said. "There are chores. The kids need looking after, meals to make, bills to pay. Every time I visit, you say something that makes it seem like that's all you care about. Have you thought about how it's been for me these past 7 weeks? Do you see what it has been like for the boys?" "No, I don't," I said, a bit sarcastically. "I guess that's because I only see you and the boys a few times a week. I have friends who visit more often than my own family. And have you forgotten how I got here, Clarissa? It was to help someone in danger." Shannon was crying as she shook her head. "Yes, Patrick," she replied, her voice trembling. "We all know how you ended up here. That's all we've been hearing about for weeks. I don't need you to remind me every day." "That's not fair," I replied coolly. "You're only here a few times a week, so I can't remind you daily," I added with a hint of sarcasm. Fine, she said, picking up her bag. "Just let me know when you'll be coming home." "I already told you," I said, feeling frustrated. Clarissa turned to walk out of the room. "I'll be home tomorrow morning. No matter what, I'm leaving here tomorrow morning. If you're not here, I'll call someone else to come get me," I called after her. I knew she could still hear me, but she didn't respond. Alone in my room, I hung my head. I had fought so hard to come back, and now, as much as I wanted to leave the hospital, I was beginning to feel worried about going home. Those two troubled individuals had nearly taken my life. It seemed like everything that was happening might ruin my marriage, and I felt helpless to stop it. Just moments after Clarissa walked out, I noticed a figure in the doorway. Looking up, I saw Shannon standing there. "I'm so sorry, Patrick. I didn't mean to overhear, but—" Her voice trailed off. I smiled to ease the tension. "It's okay. You didn't do anything wrong," I replied. "I've just been really stressed out lately. Do you want to sit for a moment?" I asked as I got up. "Well, I should probably get home. I just wanted to drop by before I pick up Bridget from my parents' house," she said, finally managing a small smile. I quickly changed the subject to fill the silence. "Hey, did you hear the good news? I'm leaving here tomorrow." She gasped in surprise. "Oh my God, that's wonderful. When? I want to make sure Bridget is here to see you off." "Tomorrow morning around 10. At least, that's what Dr. Slattery said this morning," I explained. "Wow, finally getting to go home. I bet your boys will be so happy to see their dad again," she said. "Yeah, I can't wait. I'll be riding horses and getting back to work soon. I still have a lot of physical therapy, though. But the sheriff said I could start working again when I'm ready," I said, trying to stay positive. "I'm really happy for you, Patrick. I truly am," she said, her eyes shining with tears of joy. I wondered why I seemed to affect women this way lately. "I know you need to prepare for tomorrow. I should go get my little munchkin." Shannon set her jacket down and stepped forward to give me a hug. As we embraced, I felt a warm comfort, and I couldn't remember the last time a hug felt so nice. Her warmth and the soft scent of her hair made me feel at ease. We held on to each other for what felt like a long time, both of us not wanting to let go. Eventually, it felt a bit awkward to keep hugging, but breaking apart seemed even harder. I tilted my head so I could whisper, "Thank you, Shannon, for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." She quietly replied, "No, thank you, Patrick. You helped my little girl. I can never fully repay you." The warmth of her breath felt magical, making me shiver slightly. I hugged her a bit tighter, and she returned the embrace. We both felt it was time to let go, and we slowly released each other. As we pulled away, Shannon gently touched my face and placed a soft kiss on my cheek. "Goodbye and good night, Patrick. I'll see you in the morning." She left the room, but her presence stayed with me long after she was gone. I struggled to focus the rest of the evening as I packed my few things. At least I had my black Minnesota Vikings sweats ready for my trip in the morning. I should have been excited to leave, but my mind was only on Shannon. The excitement kept me awake all night. At 9:30 the next morning, the whole nursing staff from my floor greeted me with a wheelchair. Brian, my dedicated nurse, was there to help me get from my room to the hospital entrance. As we entered the large lobby, I was surprised to see hundreds of people there to send me off. My entire medical team was present, along with members of the Mason County Sheriff's Department and the Red River Falls Police Department, except for those who were on duty. A line of police cars and 2 fire trucks from the local fire department were ready to escort me out of town. Sheriff Bud Roberts was waiting with his department's Chevy Suburban, joined by Clarissa, Nick, and Jake, who were ready to take me home. Not far from the vehicle stood Shannon and Bridget. I stood up from my wheelchair and lifted Bridget for one last hug while local photographers captured the moment. Bud shook my hand, all smiles for the cameras. Clarissa tried to act cheerful, but Nick and Jake were genuinely happy to see me. Clarissa quickly got into the front passenger seat next to Bud while I took the back seat with my friends on either side of me. The parade of police and fire trucks with lights flashing and sirens sounding left the hospital as people lined the sidewalks from the main entrance all the way to Enterprise Avenue, the main street that follows U.S. Highway 120 through Red River Falls. I glanced back and felt relieved as Holy Family Regional Medical Center got smaller in the distance. We turned onto U.S. Highway 120 and headed home. Even away from the hospital, there were still small groups of supporters with signs, flags, and banners. I was deeply touched by their kindness. Nick and Jake pointed out each group so I wouldn't miss anything. As we reached the high school campus on the south side of town, the police cars and fire trucks pulled into the parking lot while Bud continued on toward home. "How does the hero feel today?" Bud asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. Better than I deserve, I smiled back. I can't thank you enough for everything, Bud. I really appreciate you bringing my family to me today. Oh, it was no trouble at all, Pat. It was the least I could do. He smiled at Clarissa, who smiled back, then focused on the road again. What did you think of all the people who came out for you? That was quite something, wasn't it? Unbelievable, I replied. How did everyone know I was coming home today? I can't understand that. I know news travels fast, but not this fast. It was on the website, Dad, Nick said. The one they set up for you, Jake added. I felt confused. I had no idea about any website. It's called Caring Bridge, Nick explained. They created it to keep everyone updated on how you were doing after your injury. Did you make it, Clarissa? I asked her. No, Danny Larson and some others did that, she answered. There's even a Facebook page, Dad, Jake said with pride. You have over 100,000 likes and more than 10,000 comments? Wow, this is the age of the internet. I wasn't sure how I felt about strangers knowing about my recovery, but I was really touched by all the support and kindness. About 10 miles south of Red River Falls, Bud turned the big SUV west onto Rattlesnake Road, the gravel road leading to our land. Everything looked familiar as I looked forward to seeing our small farm just beyond the next hill. The sight of our house felt like meeting an old friend after a long time apart. Even the older buildings and hay shed were heartwarming sights. Bud parked the Suburban next to the old building that worked as our garage. Though it was nearly 80 years old, it was still strong and kept our vehicles dry in winter. We all stepped out of the vehicle. With the boys beside me, I walked over to the horse corral I built and clicked my tongue a few times to call our horses. My loyal horse, Blackjack, trotted over and nuzzled my cheek, checking to see if I was really me. After getting his reassurances, he lowered his head, enjoying the scratches behind his ears. I hoped my recovery would go smoothly so I could ride him before winter brought its chill. The boys and I spent around 10 minutes petting the horses before heading back to the house. Our farmhouse was more than 80 years old too, but it was in great shape. The main change we made since moving in was replacing the old boiler with a new, efficient one. With 5 bedrooms, we had plenty of space for all our hobbies. Well, Bud said, I should get back home. I promised my wife I'd take her out for lunch today. I'm sure you all need some time to settle in. Thanks a lot, Bud, I said, shaking his hand firmly. I really appreciate everything. No, Patrick, I appreciate all you have done. Take your time coming back. Focus on your recovery and getting yourself fully well. The job will be fine for now. Please tell Margot I said hello and that we missed her today, I said as Bud turned to leave. Margot is short for Margoline. She and Bud have been married for almost 25 years. Sure, Patrick. She wanted me to let you know how happy she is for all of you and that she'll see you soon. She had an important appointment today or she would have been here. I didn't ask for more details as Bud left quietly. I'm going to start getting our lunch ready, Clarissa said before heading into the kitchen. I took it easy the rest of the weekend, knowing I had a full week of recovery work ahead. It would only get more challenging as time went on. I still had about a month of this ahead of me before I could return to work fully, and even that was a hopeful plan. But I had managed to overcome difficulties before, and I was determined to do so again. Clarissa and I were polite to each other, but it felt like things were just routine. I tried to create moments for us to connect, but she always had excuses. She mentioned having a tough day with her health, or she was tired from a new volunteer project, or she worried that my injuries might worsen if we spent too much time together. I had to smile at that last thought. The tension between us kept growing. At one point, I shared my worries about how distant we had become and said I was tired of the excuses. I'm sorry you feel that way, but my health needs are important too, she replied firmly. I was becoming frustrated that she often brought up her ongoing health issues, which she could fix with medication but chose to handle with herbal remedies instead. She insisted many couples focused on their work and families and didn't need to prioritize closeness, and that was fine. I responded, Clarissa, many couples have more closeness than us and still face their own issues. Well, it sounds like you have a choice to make then, she said before walking away to our room. The only way I found to cope was through my daily workouts and physical therapy. Getting a good exercise session in helped ease some of the stress. After a month at home, I was allowed to return to work on a limited basis, which meant doing paperwork and helping other deputies with their reports. I had physical therapy 3 days a week for 2 hours in the morning, and then I spent the rest of the day at the sheriff's office. Along with some other deputies and some outside applicants, I put in my application for the captain and chief deputy position that had opened up after Floyd Franklin left. A group of people from different county and city departments looked over all the applications. I felt confident because I had college degrees in criminal justice and psychology, plus my military experience. Saving Bridget also looked good on my application. The committee took 2 weeks to review everything. Each candidate had to sit in front of the panel for an interview. Some questions were tough, while others were a bit funny. Sometimes people without police experience ask questions based on what they've seen on TV and in movies. But everyone meant well and tried their best to find the right candidate. In the end, the committee picked who they thought was the best choice and sent that name to Sheriff Roberts, who would make the final call. On a Monday, after my therapy session, I was at work organizing some old reports when Bud came out of his office. "Hey, Pat, what are you working on?" Bud asked. I let out a long breath and gave Bud a small smile. Just taking these old handwritten reports and typing them into the new system. Bud frowned. He knew this work was tough and didn't like making deputies spend part of their time on it. Even though these reports were very old, the state required that records from the past 15 years be entered into the state database. This was frustrating because nearby states only needed 10 years and the national rule was only 7. Any unresolved felony cases, no matter how old, also had to be updated and entered. No one had even started on that pile of cold case files, which also needed the evidence to be organized again. "Why don't you take a break and come to my office for a minute?" Bud suggested. I was happy to take a break from the boring work and replied, "Sounds good." I followed Bud a few steps to his office and sat in one of the 2 leather chairs in front of his big oak desk. A big desk was positioned right behind Bud's executive chair. It looked quite large because Bud preferred using a laptop instead of a regular computer. Bud, like any dedicated sheriff or police chief, had many photos, plaques, and awards on his walls that showed his nearly 30-year career in law enforcement. He started his career, just like me, at the Red River Falls Police Department, where he worked for over 18 years and became a lieutenant before winning his first election as sheriff. Bud had won 3 terms so far and didn't expect any serious competition for the next election. "Pat, as you know, the committee has helped me over the past few weeks by reviewing applications and interviewing candidates for the captain and chief deputy sheriff position," Bud said. "I have their report and recommendation for the person they think should get the job." Bud handed me a plain folder with the report. I opened it and looked at the cover letter on top of all the evaluations. I quickly read the last paragraph of the letter. "Therefore, the selection committee recommends Deputy Sheriff Sean Patrick Quinn for the position of Captain and Chief Deputy of the Mason County Sheriff's Department. The committee trusts that Sheriff William Roberts will carefully consider this recommendation and will make the final decision based on the information in this report. The committee members thank the sheriff, his department, and the Mason County Board of Supervisors for asking for our help with this important task. Sincerely, R. Holland Steele, Director, Red River Falls Public Works Selection Committee, Chair. Wow. I couldn't believe it. I felt confident that I would be a strong candidate, but I also knew other deputies and members of the Red River Falls PD had applied as well and would have been good captains. One of those candidates was Pete Sturgeon, a current captain at Red River Falls PD, and I knew he might not take the news well. Pete was aware that Bud and I had been friends since our time at the Red River Falls PD. Bud reached his hand across the table. "Congratulations, Captain. I'm happy to say this was an easy decision to accept." I shook the sheriff's hand firmly. "Thank you, Sheriff. I won't let you down." We talked for a few more minutes, and he let me know that my promotion would be officially announced later that afternoon around 2:30 p.m., as the day shift ended and the night shift workers arrived. "Now," Bud said, "I bet your family would love to hear this good news." "I'm excited to tell them," I replied with a smile. I hadn't felt this happy in a long time. "Just so you know," Bud warned, "if you think you're done with paperwork, think again. There's still a lot of that ahead. You'll be the main supervisor for all the lieutenants and deputies, and you'll also assist with the Narcotics Task Force and Special Operations Group. You'll prepare and serve some warrants, too." "I know. But the chance to have more regular hours and be home for dinner most nights is worth it, I said. Congratulations, Patrick. I look forward to working with you even more closely, Bud said as he waved me out of his office. Captain Pat Quinn, Chief Deputy Pat Quinn. I repeated those titles in my mind, hoping they would feel normal soon. I knew it would take some time to adjust. I focused on my work and returned to my desk to continue sorting reports. Before I realized it, Bud was by my side again, pulling up a chair. "One more thing, Pat," he said with a serious look. "I forgot to mention that I'm sending you to a 2-week training course in Minneapolis. It's a special program for law enforcement officers. Instead of sending people to Georgia all the time, they're offering classes around the country. They just finished one in Cheyenne, and the next one will be in the Twin Cities in about 2 weeks. It'll be a good way for you to start learning at the next level." "Wow, sounds serious," I said as Bud stood back up. "It's not too bad. It's more about learning and thinking than anything else. The course is mostly in the classroom with a few exercises for practice," Bud explained. "Oh, great," I replied jokingly. "Sounds like a lot of presentations." Bud gave my shoulder a friendly pat. "Welcome to the next level, Pat," he chuckled as he walked away. "I just wanted to let you know so you can tell your family that you'll be away for a couple of weeks. But don't worry, meals and hotel costs are on us, and if it makes you feel any better, I'll be there too." "That doesn't help much," I laughed. I returned to my computer thinking about the promotion and the upcoming training course. Perhaps the 2-week break would give me and Clarissa some time to think things over. That afternoon, Sheriff Roberts called all the deputies and staff into the briefing room to share some news. He announced that I was promoted to captain and chief deputy. He kept it simple and asked everyone to clap for me. They did, but the applause seemed a bit softer than I expected. I knew some deputies were also in the running for the job, so I figured their reaction was because of that. I decided not to dwell on it, and at 4 p.m., I got into my truck and drove home. When I walked into the house, Clarissa was helping the boys with their homework, and dinner was cooking in the oven. "How was work?" she asked. "Interesting," I answered, keeping it a bit mysterious. "Oh? How so? I thought you were stuck with old paperwork," she replied, confused. "I was, but something happened just before noon." "Are you going to tell me, or will it be like 20 questions?" she said, eager to know. I hung my jacket on the back of a chair and replied, "The selection committee made their choice and recommended me to Bud for the captain and chief deputy role. Bud accepted and offered me the job." "What, chief deputy?" Clarissa looked surprised. "That's like second in command, right?" "Yes, exactly." "So it goes sheriff, then you?" she asked, trying to understand. "Yes, that's right," I said slowly. "Are you not happy about this?" "No, it's not that. It's just, wow," she stammered. "Do I at least get a hug for my promotion?" I asked, opening my arms. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just such a surprise," Clarissa said as she hugged me. I hoped the hug would last longer, but she pulled away quickly. She stood there with her arms crossed, looking a bit unsure. "I just want you to know there will be some changes," I explained. "My work hours will be more like office hours now, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., like the courthouse. But with my new role, I might need to come in early and stay late sometimes. I'll get extra time off for that. But there will also be more meetings, even on weekends." "Will you usually know about changes in advance?" Clarissa asked. "Most of the time, yes. But sometimes things come up. I may also need to travel for work from time to time. I'll be gone for 2 weeks at the beginning of November for a leadership training seminar." "How often will you have to travel?" she asked. "It's hard to say," I said, grabbing a soda from the fridge. "I think some parts of the job will be pretty routine and I'll learn as I go," I said. Clarissa paused. "What about the more difficult parts?" she asked. I sighed and replied, "Well, most of that is behind me. I won't be patrolling anymore, so no more car stops or chasing after anyone. My job now will include being in charge of the narcotics task force and special operations team." "So you'll still deal with that kind of work?" she asked, looking a bit worried. "Not quite," I reassured her. "As the officer in charge, I'll be focused on planning and overseeing things. Sure, I'll still dress for the job, just in case something unexpected happens, but overall, I won't be out there on the front lines like before." "Good," she said, sounding relieved. "Will you get a nice pay raise with this new role?" I chuckled and almost spilled my drink. "You sure get straight to the point," I said, wiping my chin. Well, I figured your pay would go up. You have more responsibilities now. They better pay you more. Calm down, I said gently. My salary as a patrol deputy was just over $55,000 a year. The chief deputy makes $89,000 a year, I added. Wow, Clarissa said. I expected a raise, but not that much. Well, you have to understand that I was chosen for this position over the sergeants and lieutenants. That's a significant promotion. An hour later, we all sat down for dinner and talked more about my new job. For the first time in a long while, our home felt warm and inviting. I didn't get any extra attention that night, but when Clarissa came to bed, she cuddled up next to me and gave me a sweet goodnight hug. It was nice to feel that closeness again after a long time. I didn't push for anything over the next week, but I started to feel nervous as the law enforcement conference in the Twin Cities approached. I brought home flowers for Clarissa, and she accepted them with a smile. At least she didn't make any comments about expecting something in return, which was often the case when I brought flowers home. Over the past year, she'd started to view romantic gestures with doubt. Finally, it was the night before I was to leave for the conference. I couldn't ignore it anymore. It had been over 5 months since Clarissa and I had shared a close moment. I was worried that if I left for the conference without a final moment of true connection, our relationship would stay strained. I had been packing my things when Clarissa came into the room looking for something. I walked up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist. She didn't pull away, but placed her hands on mine, accepting the comfort of the embrace. I leaned in a bit closer to her. Clarissa, I really want to connect before I go, I whispered. Patrick, please, don't, she replied, moving away a little. I felt confused and frustrated. What? What's wrong? I asked. Clarissa sat on the edge of the bed, arms crossed and looking away. What do you expect from me, Clarissa? I said, trying to understand. Why have things changed between us over the years? I could ask you the same thing, she shot back. What do you want from me? It feels like you want me to stay home, handle everything, and do whatever you say. You know, I said, trying to stay calm, if we shared a moment together every now and then, I might consider your feelings. And that's a big might, she replied. You're not the only one who has been affected by everything lately, she said desperately. This has affected me too. Do you know what it's like for me? To feel so alone before I'm even 35? To think about facing the future on my own? With 2 boys to care for by myself? Don't use the boys as an excuse, Claire, I said quietly. We're talking about problems that have been going on for years. This isn't just about what happened recently. Oh, I'm sorry, Clarissa sighed dramatically. I'm sorry my needs seem less important than your need for connection. She waved her hands to make her point. Did you ever think about what is best for me? Yes, I have. And what is best for you would be to talk to your doctor and consider treatment. Seeking help is okay, Clarissa, I tried to explain. I don't want to take pills and medications, Patrick, she replied. You know how those things affect me. I shook my head. It sounds like you're making excuses. I'm tired of this, and I shouldn't have to keep asking for something that should be a normal part of our marriage. If you really cared about me, Clarissa, I said as I packed my things, you would try to solve this instead of making excuses. And if you cared about me, she replied sharply, you would want what feels right for me and not push me into things that make me uneasy. You're only thinking about yourself and what you want. I felt exhausted from the whole situation. Right then, I decided to use the 2 weeks I would spend in the Twin Cities to think about my next steps when I returned. If this was how my life was going to be, I didn't want any part of it. Living in the country wasn't worth being unhappy, and losing that property seemed likely if I ended up getting a divorce. Strangely, instead of being afraid, I felt a sense of calm when I accepted that. Clarissa noticed I had been quiet for a while as I continued to pack. Finally, the silence got to her, and she asked, What, Patrick, what do you want from me? I paused my packing, stood tall, and took a deep breath. I'll tell you what I want, Clarissa, I said, sitting next to her. I want a relationship where both of us feel valued. I want us to show each other kindness and care. I want a partner who appreciates my gestures and doesn't always think there's something else behind them. I want someone who feels comfortable with my affection. I want someone who doesn't push me away when I want to be close because I love her. And after almost 15 years of being married, I still see her as beautiful as when we first met. I want my wife back, the woman I fell in love with, not a version of her who feels distant and can't share warmth with me. Lately, you feel like just a memory of the woman I loved. I keep wishing she will come back, but each day that hope slips a little more. I stood, zipped up my suitcase, and placed it by the bedroom door. I hung my suits and uniforms behind the door, making sure they were neat. Clarissa sat silently with tears in her eyes. I had hoped she would say something, but instead, the silence continued. "You'll have the bed to yourself for the next couple of weeks," I said gently, "so you might as well enjoy it tonight." Clarissa just sat there, tears streaming down her face. I took some blankets and a pillow from the hall closet and went downstairs to the living room, trying to make myself comfortable on the couch. My alarm went off at 4:30 the next morning. The conference wasn't set to start until 10 o'clock, so I had enough time to take a shower, get dressed, and head out for the event. I decided to use the main bathroom instead of the master bath to let Clarissa sleep. After my shower, I put on some khaki dress pants, a dress shirt, a tie, and a tan blazer I had bought for the occasion. I picked out a pair of brown leather boots I had treated myself to after my promotion. Since becoming captain, Chief Deputy Bud insisted I wear suits to work instead of my usual uniform. I finished packing my clothes into the car and went back inside to give each of my boys a quick kiss on the head. They were still sleeping, and I didn't want to wake them. I had promised to call them that night and regularly while I was away. My new work vehicle since becoming captain was a silver unmarked Ford Crown Victoria from 2013. It had a standard police interceptor package, shocks, brakes, a powerful engine, but didn't have the large radio and light setup or the computer. As I was about to leave, I noticed Clarissa standing at the front door in her pajamas and robe. I reached for the door, thinking about getting out of the car, but something stopped me. I felt that if I went over, I might embarrass myself trying to fix things from the night before, or she might give me some hope while I was gone. I sat for a moment, then put the car in gear and drove out of the driveway onto Rattlesnake Road. Looking in the rearview mirror, I could still see Clarissa by the front door as I drove over the hill. As I approached U.S. Highway 120, I wondered if that was the last time I would see my home before deciding about my marriage. The drive from my house near Red River Falls to the Twin Cities took over 3 hours. I hit the end of rush hour traffic and made good time getting to the hotel. Luckily, the conference was at the same place, so I wouldn't have to travel far. The sheriff's department covered my room, meals, and gave me money for dry cleaning and laundry during my stay. Bud Roberts was also attending, so I decided to check on his room when I got to the front desk. It was just after 9 a.m. and there was still some time before the conference began. "I'm sorry," the desk clerk said. "I don't see anyone by that name registered here." "Really?" I replied, confused. "His full name is William Roberts. Perhaps there's a Will or Bill Roberts." The clerk typed on his computer. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't have anyone with that last name staying here right now." "I don't see anyone by that name with a reservation here." That was odd, I thought. Maybe Bud had picked another hotel. Well, I would catch up with him at the conference. I took my things up to the 8th floor where my room was. I slid the keycard into the door and opened it. Inside was a big king-size bed, a sofa that could pull out into a bed, a nice bathroom with a jacuzzi, and a small desk with Wi-Fi. There was also a large TV, a microwave, a fridge, and a coffee maker with lots of coffee options. Overall, it seemed like a good place to stay for the next 2 weeks. It would be challenging, but I felt I could manage. At 9:45, I headed down to the conference center. I wasn't wearing formal clothes, but it was easy to tell I was a police officer. I had a small badge pin on my right side, an American flag on my left, and my sheriff's badge was visible on my belt. A few other attendees were in their uniforms, but most were dressed like me. The conference brochures clearly stated that guns were not allowed on hotel property, and no excuses would be accepted for bringing a weapon during the event. As I looked at the registration table while signing in, I spotted Bud's name tag, which meant he hadn't checked in yet. I decided to wait near the entrance of the main conference hall for him to arrive. It was a bit uncomfortable standing there because I was holding a pile of materials for the 2 weeks ahead. At 9:55, Bud still hadn't come, so I took a seat. The conference began right at 10 o'clock with the keynote speaker, a retired deputy police commissioner from Chicago, who spoke until 11:45. We had a short break for lunch, and the afternoon session would start again at 1:15. I left my seat in the conference room and walked into the large hotel lobby to call Bud and see where he was. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Bud Roberts," he said. "Hey, Bud, it's Patrick. Where are you? I missed you at registration." "Hi, Patrick. I'm dealing with something here," he replied. "I have an emergency meeting with the county supervisors. They're discussing next year's budget and making some tough choices. I need to talk some sense into them. I hope to make it to the conference by tomorrow or Wednesday at the latest. How's it going for you there?" "Oh, it's going fine, I guess," I said. "We only had the first session this morning with a former deputy commissioner from Chicago who talked about being a good leader and making plans. Just the usual talk to motivate everyone," I said, walking around the lobby. "Well, it should be a good experience for you, Pat. I'm sure you'll bring back plenty of ideas we can use." That felt strange. It sounded like he had no plans to visit me here at all. "Anyway," he continued, "wish me luck with the supervisors. Hope to see you later this week. Bye." "Yeah, take care," I replied, hanging up the phone. "Great. My home life was a mess, and I was hoping to talk to a friend about it while I was here. It looked like I would have to handle my feelings on my own for the next few days, at least unless Bud decided to show up." I had a light lunch in the smallest of the hotel's 3 restaurants. A few other conference attendees were eating too, but I chose a small table by myself to think. The afternoon session lasted from 1:15 to 4:30, marking the end of the first day of the conference. I went to an evening mixer in one of the banquet halls and enjoyed a drink while chatting with some other attendees. I recognized a few people. The world of law enforcement can feel small at times, and you often meet officers from different places. Most of the attendees were from Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Wisconsin, but at least 3 came all the way from Denver, Colorado. For a few hours, I gained comfort from being around fellow police officers. I headed to my room around 8:30 and called home to talk to the boys. We chatted for about half an hour. Nick told me he wanted to play basketball this winter and asked if we could shop for new basketball shoes when I got back. Jake shared that he was upset he didn't get to play too. I told him that if it made him feel better, I would buy him a pair of basketball shoes as well, and that I would put a basketball hoop in the barn so we could practice indoors during winter. I wondered if I was really telling my son the truth as I made that promise. Still, Jake felt better and said he would stop being annoyed with his brother for playing basketball. Nick got back on the phone to say goodbye after I finished talking with Jake. Nick asked me if I wanted to talk to their mom, but I told him I just wanted to catch up with my boys tonight. "Are you and Mom upset with each other?" Nick asked seriously. His question felt like a punch to my stomach, even from far away. "Why do you say that?" I replied. "Kids can be more aware of things than we think." "It just feels that way," he said softly. "Don't worry," I said. "There's nothing you need to be concerned about." "Then why don't you want to talk to Mom?" he pressed. "Well," I explained, "your mom and I talk a lot. We chatted a lot last night, and I saw her this morning before I left." It wasn't a complete lie, but I hoped it would be enough for now. "Okay then. Will you call tomorrow?" Nick asked. "Of course I will, buddy. I'm looking forward to it. Now get some sleep. You'll need it if you decide to play basketball," I encouraged him. "Okay, Dad. Talk to you tomorrow. Love you." "I love you too, little buddy. Give your mom and your brother a hug from me, okay?" "I promise," he said. "Good night," I replied as I hung up. Even the kids could sense the tension. Things needed to improve between my wife and me, and soon. The question was whether they would get better or worse. I figured I wouldn't know until I got home next week. Sleep came faster than I expected, helped a bit by the drink I had enjoyed at the conference mixer. I was relieved when Bud finally arrived the next morning. He had gotten a room at a nearby motel for some reason, but we still managed to have breakfast and lunch together in my hotel. In the evenings, Bud spent time with other police chiefs and sheriffs who were at the conference. Some he already knew, while others he met there. A large group gathered for drinks and dinner each evening, which was fine. It was nice to have a friend around. I didn't talk much about my issues back home. Trying to maintain a good image for my boss seemed smart. I had decided before the conference that I would leave my problems behind. Either things between Clarissa and me would get better while I was away, or they wouldn't. If they didn't, it would probably make my next steps easier. Bud and I sat next to each other during the class sessions, but didn't talk much during breaks. Bud was focused on networking, which meant shaking hands and building connections. He told me that to be sheriff, you had to be a bit like a politician and know how to work with other officials. In Mason County, that meant dealing with the Board of Supervisors. They had caused him to be late for the conference. There were only 3 of them to deal with, but Bud said each one was hard to handle. The next 3 days at the conference passed quickly. The weekend sessions were only in the morning, allowing the attendees to explore the Twin Cities. We even looked forward to a group trip to watch the Minnesota Wild play at the Xcel Energy Center. On Friday at lunch, just as we were about to order, Bud got a phone call. He stepped away for about 10 minutes and returned, looking upset. "Bad news, Pat," he said as he sat down. "I need to leave right away. There's more trouble with the supervisors. If I don't meet them, they won't put the new jail plan on the ballot next year." "Really? Can they do that?" I asked. "For sure," Bud replied, sipping his coffee. "Anything that goes to a county election needs their approval first, and we really need that new jail." I understood Bud's situation. He was right about the need for a new jail. A lot of the budget for corrections was going to house prisoners in jails outside the county. Some were placed as far away as Choctaw County, even though we had space. Others were in Lakota and Iroquois counties, which charged Mason County around $80, $00 a day per prisoner. Right now, we had 10 prisoners in Lakota County, staying on average for 10 days each, costing taxpayers about $800 daily, $5,600 weekly, and over $20,000 monthly, just for that one county. Still, it seemed strange that Bud had to leave right then. By the time he fought through the busy afternoon traffic in Minneapolis, it would be late before he got home. I figured it was true that a lawman's work is never done, but the thought bothered me for some reason. The Friday sessions ended at 4:30 as usual, and I went straight to my room to change. I decided to check out the Mall of America and visit a store called Legoland, which one of the other attendees had mentioned. Nick and Jake were big Lego fans, and I thought I would bring them something special to enjoy when I got home, as a sort of sorry I was gone for 2 weeks gift. When I arrived at my hotel room, I noticed a blinking light on the hotel phone, indicating I had a message. I picked up the phone and called the front desk. "Front desk, this is Adam," a voice said on the line. "Hi, this is Patrick Quinn in room 832. Do you have a message for me?" I asked. "One moment, please," the clerk said as he looked for the message. "Mr. Quinn?" "Yes, that's me," I replied. "I have a message for you. Miss Caroline Bennett called and asked you to return her call as soon as you can," he said. "Caroline? My mother-in-law? What could she want? I hadn't seen much of her since she moved to the city." I grabbed a pen and quickly wrote down the number the clerk gave me. After we hung up, I paused for a moment thinking about the call. My relationship with her had been pretty normal, but one hot day in August changed everything, stirring up feelings I didn't expect. And now here I was, a few hundred miles from home, in a hotel in the same city where she lived with her new partner. I couldn't shake the thought. This could only lead to trouble. Still, I couldn't stop myself from dialing Caroline's number, feeling anxious as I waited. The phone rang almost 5 times before it was picked up. "Hello?" came a woman's voice. "Caroline?" I asked almost hesitantly. "Patrick, I'm so glad you called back." She sounded genuinely happy. "Well, I just finished the afternoon session of the conference and thought I'd call before I went out for dinner," I said. "Oh, no. Did you have plans?" she asked. "Oh, not really," I stammered. "There are several places to eat in the hotel, and the Mall of America is close by." "Oh, please! Stay away from the mall. It's just an overpriced tourist trap," she laughed. "Even the airport looks better than that place." "Okay," I chuckled. "If you say so." "Speaking of dinner," she continued, "if you don't have plans tonight, Martin and I would love to take you out. It's been a while, and I want to hear all about Clarissa and the boys." "Well," I said, "that sounds good. Where should we meet?" "I hope you don't mind," she started, "but I made a reservation at Chez Stéphane." Chez Stéphane was the fancy restaurant in the hotel. It wasn't one of the options I had considered, and definitely not a place I usually went to since I'm on a budget. It was the kind of restaurant where the prices weren't even listed on the menu, because if you had to ask how much it cost, it meant you probably shouldn't be there. Well, that's a bit too fancy for me, I said. Don't be silly. You came all this way, and you deserve a nice welcome and a meal like a king. Martin and I will take care of you while you're here. I won't hear any arguments. Your money isn't needed as long as you're with us. I guess that settled it. All right, Caroline, you win. I'm looking forward to seeing you and meeting Martin. When should I be there? I asked. Martin and I will arrive for drinks around 8 o'clock, and we have dinner booked for 8:30. Martin doesn't like to eat early, and I don't either, she replied. Great. 8 it is. I'll see you then, I said, getting ready to end the call. Perfect. Oh, and Patrick. Yes, I answered. There was a short pause before she spoke again. I'm really excited to see you tonight, she said, sounding very eager. Me too, was all I could think to say. Okay, see you soon, she said warmly. I hung up the phone and sighed. Caroline had sounded so excited, but excited for what? It couldn't be anything too serious, though I secretly hoped for a nice evening together. She was bringing the new man in her life with her, so I doubted it could be anything more than friendship. But if not romance, then what? Just to keep me on my toes? Sitting across from me looking amazing, smelling great. It had to be more than just checking in on how Clarissa and the kids were. She could easily call her daughter to do that. And she did. Even after moving to the city, she and Clarissa chatted on the phone for about an hour at least 4 to 5 times a week. I let those thoughts swirl in my head while I took a long, hot shower. I tried to push away worries about what was happening back home, focusing instead on making a good impression at dinner and being a polite guest for Caroline and Martin. I decided to wear my dark gray suit with a blue patterned tie and my freshly polished shoes. After a hot shower, a clean shave, and sharp clothes, I felt ready for the evening ahead, and for Caroline and Martin. I headed down to the main area of the hotel and reached Chez Stéphane just before 8 o'clock. The maitre d' looked me up and down, giving me a thorough look. I could see in his eyes that he thought, he doesn't belong here, especially when he noticed the large badge on my belt. Welcome to Chez Stéphane, sir. How may I assist you? He asked with a forced smile. He wasn't even going to ask if I had a reservation. I'm waiting for some people, I said. Maybe you could wait outside for your group, he suggested. I really wanted to push back against him. Is there any reason I can't wait inside? I asked. I'm sorry, sir, but Chez Stéphane only accepts reservations and all our tables are full for the rest of the night. Perhaps. He tried to say more. Patrick! Caroline interrupted. The maitre d' immediately stood tall. It was clear he recognized Caroline and the man with her. Patrick! She called again as she gave me a warm hug. It's so good to see you. It's great to see you too, Caroline, I replied. And it truly was. Caroline looked fantastic for just under 55. Her hair was freshly styled, and she wore a lovely black velvet dress that fit her perfectly and fell just below her knees. She had on nice ankle boots and a stunning string of pearls. Her perfume was delightful, a scent that was new to me but very captivating. Her makeup was perfect, making her look so amazing that younger women would have envied her. Behind Caroline was a gentleman who was almost as tall as me, but appeared to weigh a good 40 to 50 pounds more. He seemed to be in his late 50s or early 60s, had a round face, wore glasses, and was clean-shaven with little hair. He didn't try to hide his baldness, but seemed to be fine with it. He appeared lively and cheerful, with a personality like a warm-hearted salesman. He was dressed sharply in a custom suit that likely cost a fortune. Patrick, Caroline said, linking her arm with the man's. I want you to meet Martin. Martin, this is my Patrick, she said with a big smile. My Patrick? I thought, feeling a bit out of sorts. Pleased to meet you, he said as we shook hands. I'm Martin Belmond. I want you to know, Sheriff, it's a real pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about you. I'm truly impressed with your work for that little girl. Just doing my job, I said, feeling shy about the compliment. Somehow I found myself starting to like him. Oh, such humility, Martin laughed. I could never do what you do, and I really respect our hard-working law enforcement. It's an honor to have you as our guest tonight. Shall we go in? After you, I said, holding the door and giving the maitre d' a satisfied look. The maitre d' immediately switched to full-service mode. Mr. Belmond and Miss Bennett, we're delighted to have you back at Chez Stéphane. Please follow me. Your table is ready for you in the bar, and dinner will be served at 8:30, he said, picking up 3 drink menus made of leather. The maitre d' took us into a beautifully decorated bar that looked pristine. Even the staff looked nicer than how I typically dressed. The drink menus, like the food menu, didn't show any prices. Martin seemed very knowledgeable about wine. Without even looking at the list, he ordered a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon from 1969. The maitre d' turned to me and asked, "And what will you have, sir?" "I'd like a pint of Killian's Irish Red, if you have it," I replied politely. "Of course, sir," he said. "Your waitress will bring your drinks soon." I could tell he was surprised that I chose beer in such an upscale place, but I was just thirsty and not a fan of wine. A friendly young waitress with short blonde hair soon arrived with Martin's wine, 2 empty glasses, and my large glass of beer. The beer was icy cold, with foam spilling down the side. "Wow," Martin laughed. "I don't usually drink beer, but that looks great." "I can only imagine the price of that bottle of wine," I said with a smile. "This is definitely the best bar and restaurant I have ever been to," I remarked as I looked around. There seemed to be more marble here than anywhere else I had seen. "Caroline and I come here about once a month. The drinks are fantastic, the service is top-notch, and the food is wonderful," Martin explained. We spent the next 20 minutes chatting and getting to know Martin. He was a real estate developer in Minneapolis and had become very successful with many projects in the Twin Cities and beyond. He had worked on buildings in places like Chicago, Milwaukee, and Madison, with more projects in progress. One of his luxury apartments in downtown Minneapolis earned over $5 million a month in rent alone. Growing up in St. Cloud, just a short drive from the cities, he was truly a self-made man. At 8:30, a waiter led us to a private table near a man playing soft music on the piano. The gentle tunes created a relaxing atmosphere perfect for the evening. As Martin had promised, the food was excellent. I ordered stuffed crab, and it was incredible. Martin insisted we have dessert, so we all decided on chocolate mousse, something Clarissa would have adored. She really loved chocolate, and it was her greatest weakness. I felt a little sad for a moment, but then Martin pulled me back into the conversation with an interesting story about a real estate deal that almost didn't happen. He was a very likable man. Even though he and Caroline might not have seemed like a perfect couple at first glance, it was clear they really got along and enjoyed each other's presence. Their connection just worked. We chatted in the restaurant until almost 11:30. I was about to say goodbye when Martin chimed in. "Well, I think I've had enough excitement for one evening, and I've shared plenty of stories with poor Patrick." All 3 of us stood up and made our way through the restaurant and into the hotel lobby. I planned to escort Martin and Caroline to the front door, but Martin stopped in the middle of the open area. "Patrick," he said, reaching out his hand again, "it has been a true joy to finally meet you. Your work as a lawman is quite legendary, and I want you to know I have great respect for you." "Thank you, Martin," I replied. "That's very kind of you." "It's the truth, Patrick, it really is," he said, turning to Caroline. They took each other's hands and smiled warmly. "So I'll see you in a few hours?" he asked Caroline. "Absolutely," she answered with a smile. After a moment, Martin walked toward the main doors of the hotel to his car and driver waiting outside. "Isn't he amazing?" Yeah, he really is," I said, feeling surprised. Caroline linked her arm with mine as we headed toward the elevator. I was taken aback. Did she plan to stay with me tonight? And would Martin be okay with that? I almost wanted to pinch myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. As we waited for the elevator, Caroline said, "You're probably curious about what's happening next, aren't you?" "That's putting it mildly," I replied. The elevator doors opened and we stepped inside. I pressed the button for the 8th floor. It's funny how high-rise hotels skip the 13th floor, isn't it? Some people are just so superstitious. It's silly, she joked. With the doors closed, it was just the 2 of us in the elevator. "You see, Patrick, Martin and I have a special relationship. We each bring what the other really needs," she explained. "Oh? How does that work?" I asked. "Well," she said, squeezing my arm a little tighter, "Martin was feeling lonely. He wanted someone who could appreciate him for who he is. He's very influential in the business world and has made many friends and some enemies across the country." There's nothing he can't do if he really tries. And Martin wanted you, I mentioned. That's right, she replied, looking earnestly at me. I meet Martin's need for someone important in his life, someone who connects well with him socially and intellectually. While I may not bring money to our relationship, I know how to navigate his social circles. In return, Martin gives me the comfort of knowing that I am taken care of. I felt there was something more to this story. I have a feeling there's a but coming, I said carefully. Caroline turned her gaze away. Well, Patrick, when something appears perfect, there's often a twist. With Martin, the issues are in our relationship. I began to understand the direction of this conversation. The elevator arrived at my floor, and we walked down the hall to my room. I took out my key card and opened the door to my suite. Thankfully, the room was neat and tidy, complete with a mint on the pillow. This is a nice little room, she remarked lightly. Little? She thinks this is small. I couldn't believe it. This was the best hotel I had ever stayed in. Anyway, Caroline continued, Martin has some health problems, including heart issues, high blood pressure, and diabetes. He has had a heart attack and surgery already. The mix of medications he takes has affected his health. As much as I would love to, she went on, sitting on the bed and taking off her shoes, his body can't handle the stress of close intimacy. We've tried many times, but he's not able to manage. His health isn't good enough for him to safely take any medication that might help. You mean he can't take anything to help? I asked. No, she replied with a sigh. It never worked for Martin, even before his first wife passed away. Now, he definitely can't take anything. So I assume you and Martin have an understanding, I guessed? Yes, we do, Patrick, she answered, gently brushing her foot against the inside of my thigh. It's the most caring thing any man has done for me. He knows I still have strong emotional needs and understands he can't meet them all. He promised me that as long as I'm loyal to him, he will support me in finding ways to feel fulfilled, as long as I always share everything with him. So Martin knows I'm here with you tonight, I concluded. Yes, he does, she said softly. At first, he hesitated because you are my son-in-law, she added with a teasing smile. But I told Martin all about our previous encounters. He could see how just remembering those times still stirred something in me. After that, he encouraged me to spend time with you tonight because he thought it was a good idea. I was happy about the chance to connect with someone. I stood up and pulled Caroline close to me. I leaned in to kiss her, and she wrapped her arms around my neck. The moment felt exciting, and the air was filled with anticipation. She looked beautiful in her dress. Caroline leaned in closer, her face showing warmth and an unspoken bond between us. She let my pants drop to the floor and held my hand gently, her touch comforting. I carefully unzipped her dress and helped her out of it. The softness of her skin felt wonderful, and I sensed a special connection as we stood close together. I know you need this, Patrick, she whispered, her voice full of feeling. I need it too. Caroline guided me to sit on the edge of the bed as we held each other tightly, the moment feeling more intimate. We shared a closeness that needed no words, a bond that had been building over time. Our connection was clear, and we both felt the depth of our feelings. After a while, we lay down together, enjoying the quiet and the comfort of being with someone who truly understood. Even after the intense moment, I felt a renewed sense of energy. I sat back up and invited Caroline to lie down beside me. We shared a close moment, gently holding each other as we settled into the bed. The bond between us felt strong, filled with understanding and support. Caroline leaned over and playfully nipped at my ear, showing the closeness we had built. We enjoyed the warmth of being together, surrounded by a calm atmosphere. The feelings we shared brought us even closer, creating a peaceful moment that needed no words. We lay there, appreciating each other's presence, letting the warmth of our connection linger. It was a serene moment that spoke volumes without needing anything more. The soft light of the room made everything feel cozy as we enjoyed being together. Caroline and I were close, our connection deepening with every passing second. I held her gently, relishing the warmth of her presence. As we lay together, she whispered softly, "Patrick, what are you doing back there?" Her voice was filled with curiosity and affection. I smiled, simply enjoying the closeness we shared. Caroline shifted a little, and we kept holding each other. Our bond felt stronger with each passing moment. She looked deeply into my eyes, and we both understood each other without needing to say anything. As we hugged, the warmth of our closeness wrapped around us, creating a calm and peaceful moment that lingered in the soft light of the room. We felt close as we shared our time together. I gently drew Caroline in closer, and we shared a soft kiss, expressing our feelings in that moment. We held each other tightly, enjoying the intensity as we both found comfort in our embrace. Caroline rested on me, and we enjoyed the rhythm of our hearts beating together. We lay there in a peaceful state for a few minutes before she gently rolled to her side. I turned toward her, lightly touching her back as a sign of care. Caroline smiled at me, still catching her breath, and placed her hand over mine. "Let's take a moment to rest," she said softly. "I agree," I replied with a smile. "We can move on when we're ready." After a little while, we both stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in towels, feeling fresh. I pulled back the covers on the bed and noticed a small damp spot on the sheet. I brushed my hand over it lightly. "Don't worry about it," Caroline said playfully. "We can take care of that later." Caroline set her towel aside, and we prepared for another sweet moment, our bond growing deeper. With each gentle touch, Caroline seemed to guide me, encouraging more closeness. Her tenderness was captivating, and our special moment continued for a while until Caroline suggested a change. "Patrick," she said playfully, "I want you to do that thing you did earlier." "And what was that?" I asked with a smile. "The part where you touched me in that new way. It felt so nice." "Of course," I replied warmly. I knelt beside the bed, making sure Caroline was comfortable. We continued our gentle moments, each gesture filled with care. Caroline responded to each touch, her movements showing the deep bond we had. Finally, I paused for a moment, letting the tenderness linger. Caroline's reaction was instant, her body responding to the love and attention. "Oh, Patrick, that feels so nice!" she exclaimed, her voice full of warmth. Hearing her happiness filled me with a strong sense of connection. We continued to enjoy our closeness, feeling our connection grow stronger with every moment. Caroline then made a request, her voice soft yet eager. "Oh, Patrick, please hold me close now." I stood beside the bed, ready to embrace this sweet moment, warmed by our bond. "Are you sure?" I asked gently, wanting to make sure she felt comfortable. "I don't mind," she whispered, her voice full of trust. "I've never felt this before, and I want to explore it with you," Caroline said, her excitement shining through. She quickly picked up her purse from the nightstand and took out a small bottle. "Here, let's share this experience, Patrick." I took the bottle and followed her lead, being careful and attentive while we prepared ourselves. Caroline focused on making sure she was comfortable. With everything ready, I moved forward cautiously, always aware of her comfort and taking things slow. Caroline encouraged me gently, her voice soothing. "That's it, Patrick. Let's keep going," she said softly. I proceeded with care, ensuring she felt relaxed. Together, we found a rhythm that felt right for both of us. Caroline offered kind words of support, letting me know she was enjoying the moment. "You're doing really well, Patrick. Just like that," she whispered. We continued to share this tender experience, both of us in tune with each other's needs. It felt special for both of us, filled with respect and care. Eventually, we reached a point where our connection felt complete. It was a sense of closeness we hadn't experienced before. I held Caroline close, the warmth of the moment surrounding us. As we lay together, a sense of calm settled in the room. Then Caroline turned to me with a more serious look. She reached for my hand and pulled me into a tighter hug. "Oh, Patrick," she sighed. "I wish it could always be like this." "Yeah, I know," I responded softly. "No, I don't think you understand," she said. "I wish you lived closer so I could see you all more often, and that we could have moments like this more frequently." "We're only about 3.5 hours away. It really isn't too far," I said. "You don't get it, Patrick. It's not just about distance." I felt a wave of concern. "What do you mean?" "You might not like me when I tell you," she replied, her voice heavier now. I smiled gently. "Nothing could make me dislike you, Caroline." Caroline turned to me, her gaze steady. "Patrick, you're a great person. I love my daughter deeply, but it hurts me to think about how she's treated you. If I were younger, I would have wished to be with someone like you." Feeling shy, I looked away. No, Patrick, it's true. I want you to understand how much I care because what I need to say next might be hard for you, she continued. This is why I wanted to be here with you tonight. When I told Martin about how much our connection means to me, he was unsure at first, but he got it. I shook my head, confused. What are you trying to say, Caroline? What does this mean? Oh, Patrick, just know how much you mean to me. I think I understand, I replied softly, wanting to comfort her. I wish you could feel that in a much deeper way, she said gently, because no matter what happens tonight or in the future, there is someone who believes in you, who cares about you, and values you, even if I can't show it again in my life. Okay, I said. I get that, Caroline. But really, what are you trying to tell me? She sighed heavily. What I need to share will be very hard for you, but you deserve to know this because you are too good a person to be treated like this. Clarissa and I are going through a tough time, I admitted, but I believe we can work through it. I've asked her to take these 2 weeks to really think things over, and I have hope she will figure things out. Oh, Patrick, she said with sympathy. You are so kind for believing that. I wish I could say you're right, but please don't be upset with me for saying this, but she looked down. Clarissa is not being faithful. It felt like my world just shook. No way, that couldn't be true. You're mistaken, I said, sitting up straight. That's not possible. Clarissa has her own problems. If she can't even talk to me, how could she be with someone else, especially someone she doesn't know? It isn't a stranger, Patrick, she replied softly. Often the most hurtful betrayals come from those closest to us. In this case, it involves your wife and someone you know. My thoughts were racing. Who? Who could it be? I can't say for sure, but I talk to Clarissa almost every night. Even though we have shared moments, she is still my daughter and I know her well. I moved to the edge of the bed, my mind racing. Caroline sat up next to me and wrapped her arms around me for comfort. This can't be happening, I stammered. Nothing makes sense. Betrayals never do, Patrick, not even between us. But if it helps, my daughter's actions started long before that day at your farm last year. What? I asked, surprised. You knew she was being unfaithful? That's why you reached out to me? That finally began to make sense. I'm really sorry, Patrick. I felt awful and embarrassed that Clarissa would hurt you. I was going through my own troubles with another divorce. I could see you were hurting, and I was too. I just wanted both of us to feel good for a little while. She touched my cheek gently. You are a good man, and you don't deserve this. I didn't deserve it with Dale, and you don't deserve it from Clarissa. I struggled to understand everything. As I thought about the past few years, I started to think that Clarissa's refusal to address her health problems might be a way to avoid being close to me. I felt overwhelmed by her reasons for keeping distance, especially when I was facing hard times. Her lack of support when I was in the hospital and her focus on the boys' schooling seemed to pull her further away from our shared responsibilities. Her frequent absences and her comments about being on the computer made me wonder what was really happening. Were her weekends with friends real or just ways to escape? I was left feeling confused. When had all this began? It seemed to start when we moved to the farm and I noticed changes in Clarissa. Her refusal to seek help only added to my doubts. I think I'm going to be sick, I said. Patrick, listen to me, Caroline said firmly. This is not your fault. What happened between us is not your fault. What happened with Clarissa is also not your fault. None of this is your fault. Who could it be? Do you have any idea? I wondered out loud. Caroline shook her head. No, I don't. All I know is that it's someone you know well. Maybe someone you work with or a friend you see often, someone from church. That's impossible. None of the guys I work with would do something like that, and we hardly socialize outside of work. I'm so sorry, Patrick. I truly am. She leaned in and gave a brief, gentle touch. Her presence was comforting. Normally, it would have lifted my spirits, but the heaviness of my situation made it hard to feel better. Please don't think poorly of me, Patrick, Caroline said softly. I'm sorry my reasons for being here tonight are so selfish. I just needed to share this moment with you and remind you of who you are. You deserve to know the truth. I appreciate that, Caroline, I replied sincerely. Really, I do. I wish we could stay like this forever, but I have a lot to sort out. Now you see why this is our last moment together. Because Patrick, she said, gently touching my face, Clarissa will always be my daughter. She and my grandsons will always come first. You know that deep down. If things go as I think they will, you and Clarissa will likely get a divorce. Even if you make up, what we've shared will just complicate things. You won't be able to be fully honest with her, and neither will I. If she finds out what we've done, it would change everything for her. Without complete honesty, any chance to make things work is doomed before it starts. Caroline was right. She had hit the nail on the head. Unless Clarissa and I could learn to be honest, we would never trust each other again. I could manage telling her about being with someone else, but I could never admit to my feelings for my mother-in-law. That would bring everything down. My marriage had already suffered 2 serious blows, one from Clarissa and one from me. Caroline called Martin to ask if she could stay the night so we could talk. This might be the last time Caroline and I would ever spend together. She promised to make it up to Martin and made it clear this was the end for us. Martin hesitated but eventually agreed, and I asked Caroline to thank him, which she did. We spent the night talking and enjoying each other's company, not falling asleep until almost 8 a.m. I didn't worry about going to the Saturday session of the conference, knowing I wouldn't be there for the rest of it. We both slept until early afternoon and shared a gentle goodbye moment. It felt warm and left us both a bit lighter. If I had to describe it, I would say it was as close to true affection as I had felt in a while. We took one last shower together so Caroline could look nice for Martin. Afterward, I walked her down to the lobby and helped her into a waiting taxi. I stood at the hotel entrance watching her drive away until the cab disappeared from view. I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever see my wonderful mother-in-law again. I quickly packed my things, gathering everything before calling the front desk to have the valet bring my car to the entrance. I didn't even take the time to officially check out of the hotel, my anger overwhelming me. I just wanted to get back on the road, back home to face what was ahead and deal with it. I tossed all my things into the back seat of the big Crown Vic and pulled out of the parking lot, heading towards the interstate that would take me home. The uneasy feeling in my stomach matched my gloomy mood perfectly. I started to wonder what my life would be like from now on. How would this change my relationship with my kids? How would it affect my job? Our friendships? I had so many questions, and I had no answers. I was about an hour west of Minneapolis when I thought I should call Sheriff Roberts. I planned to tell him we had a family issue that Clarissa needed me home for, and that I would try to attend the rest of the conference if I could. I hoped that would satisfy Bud for now and give me time to think of a better reason over the next day or so. After all, the department and the county were spending a good amount for me to be at the conference, and I was new enough in the job that I didn't want to let Bud down. I grabbed my department phone and pressed the speed dial for Bud's cell. The phone rang about 6 times before going to his voicemail. This wasn't unusual, as he often liked to be unavailable for a few hours each weekend when he was with his wife, Margaline. She was about my mother-in-law's age and, although still attractive, didn't compare to Caroline. I decided it was important enough to try calling his house phone. After a few rings, Margaline answered. "Hello?" she said, and I had to admit she had a very nice voice. "Margaline? Yes? Who is it?" "Margaline, this is Patrick Quinn." "Oh, Patrick, hello!" she exclaimed. "How is the law enforcement conference going in the big city?" "It's going well. Lots to learn," I replied, skipping over the boring truth. But before I could continue, Margaline jumped in. "Yeah, that's what Bud says. Actually, he says he's learning more at the hotel bar, just chatting with other police chiefs and sheriffs. He told me earlier that you two are going to the hockey game tonight." I had to pause. "I'm sorry," I said. "What was that?" "You cut out for a moment," I replied. "Bud says that everyone does more networking after hours than during class. I think it's great that you two can attend the conference together," she added. "He mentioned you are going to the game tonight." I was taken aback and a chill ran through me. If not for my training, I'm sure I would have lost control of my car. I started to feel shaky all over as the reality hit me. Margaline had no idea that Bud was not at the conference anymore. But if the sheriff wasn't in Minneapolis, where could he be? The only place he might be was my house. I must have zoned out for a moment. "Patrick?" Margaline's voice came through. "Are you still there?" I shook myself back into reality. Yes, I'm here. Sorry, it's been such a long day. I must have dialed the wrong number for Bud." "Oh, okay," she answered, sounding just as lost as I felt. "Well, tell Bud to call me. I'm sure you'll see him soon. It's almost dinner time, right? Yeah, dinner. Right. I was trying to sound normal, but I wasn't doing a great job. I needed to end the call fast. Well, I should go. Sorry about the mix-up. I hung up before she could say anything else. There was an exit ahead with a truck stop, and I knew I needed to pull over and clear my head. Otherwise, I risked losing focus and getting into an accident. I parked at the truck stop and went into the diner. Needing to freshen up, I headed to the bathroom. I thought washing my face might help calm me down. I knew it was going to be a long night, so I grabbed a large coffee while I was there. I sat in a booth to sort through everything I knew. Caroline clearly knew something was happening with Clarissa for over a year. I figured Caroline wouldn't give me details since that would easily reveal the source to Clarissa. Caroline mentioned that Clarissa might be involved with someone I knew, possibly a co-worker. Since I was not close with anyone else at work besides Bud, he was the only likely person. Bud's wife believed he was far away, which confirmed my suspicions. How could I have missed this? I felt embarrassed. After an hour and too much coffee, I felt calm enough to get back on the road. I probably should have eaten, but I didn't think I could handle it. My stomach was in knots. 2 hours later, I was back in Mason County, and the surroundings began to look familiar again. I took the exit off the interstate and headed west toward US 120, then north on 120 until I reached Rattlesnake Road. After making the turn west, I pulled over to gather my thoughts. Bud wasn't in Minneapolis or home, so he was likely at my house. I hoped that Clarissa would think to send the kids away for the weekend if she was going to be there with my boss. I turned off the headlights and carefully drove up the hill until I could see the farmhouse. As I got close to the driveway, I parked the car and turned off the engine. Then I walked the rest of the way home. I soon saw a big white SUV in front of the garage, shining under the yard light. The downstairs lights were on, but all the shades were down. No lights were on upstairs. I walked the last bit to the front door, looking through the windows for any signs of movement inside. Then I saw a man pass by the dining room window. I quietly walked onto the porch and peeked inside. There was my wife, Clarissa, wearing a nightgown and an open bathrobe. Next to her was Sheriff William Bud Roberts, dressed casually. They looked relaxed and cozy, but it felt wrong to see them together in my home. I watched them for a few moments. They seemed to be having a small disagreement. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but soon enough Clarissa leaned in to hug Bud. They shared a brief moment together, and it was clear there was a bond between them. That was too much for me. I felt my heart race. I was angry and pushed through the front door without thinking. Luckily, it was unlocked. My sudden entrance startled them. Bud instinctively moved to protect himself by placing Clarissa in front of him. "Patrick!" Clarissa exclaimed in surprise, her eyes wide. "What are you doing here?" Bud asked, clearly startled. "You were supposed to be in Minneapolis?" "Yeah, I know," I replied calmly as I moved closer to them. "But funny enough, Bud, so are you." I felt the anger rising inside me. "Now hold on, Patrick," Bud said, raising a hand in a calming gesture. "This isn't what you think it is." I paused. "Are you joking, Bud? Do you really think I can't see what's happening?" "No, Patrick, I don't think that at all," Bud answered. "If I thought you were trustworthy, I wouldn't have hired you," Bud added, sounding unsure as Clarissa stepped back from him. "Because to me it looks like my longtime friend and boss is involved with my wife," I said with sarcasm. "And we all know that first impressions matter." Clarissa said nothing as she moved away from us. All she could do was look down, clearly upset. "All right, Patrick, I understand," Bud said. "I regret that you had to find out like this." "Oh, well, thanks for the apology, Bud. But tell me, how long has this been going on?" "It's not what you think," Clarissa interrupted. "I'm not saying that at all. What Clarissa means, Patrick, is that we're not just having a simple relationship. We care about each other and plan to be together once everything settles down," Bud explained casually. "What do you mean, once everything settles down? When did this all start? How long has this been happening?" I asked, feeling frustrated. Bud sighed. "This began before I hired you, Patrick. I was shocked. I started working for you almost 2 years ago. Yeah, that's right. This has to stop," I insisted. "It needs to stop now." "That's not going to happen." Clarissa remained silent, tears falling down her face. "Why not?" "Because this will end with Clarissa and me together, Patrick. It will end when I say it does, not you. We already have plans. Oh? I said, annoyed. Care to share those plans with me? All right, Bud replied, moving closer. Clarissa and I love each other. We have for quite some time. I'll keep you in your role until after the election next fall. Then I'll announce my separation, and Clarissa will do the same. After things calm down, we'll go forward with our relationship. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were planning to continue their relationship, likely even getting married. And what about me? I asked. How are you going to explain to everyone that you're involved with my wife? What if I tell Margaline about this? She thinks you're at a conference. Bud's expression turned serious. Patrick, Margaline won't find out because you won't tell her. My relationship with Clarissa won't be revealed until after you and she have separated. I've taken care of everything. There's no way this ends with you and Clarissa still together. Really? How do you plan to stop me? I challenged. Patrick, I have many ways to make sure that doesn't happen. Most of them are already set up. I have reports and complaints just waiting to be used. If I think for a second that you're not following the plan, I will make sure your career suffers. I'll see to it that you face serious consequences. You're the chief deputy now, with a lot of responsibility. You oversee budgets and investigations. There might be some issues from your past that have now come to light because of your current position. Elmer Suggs? Really? I thought I was one of the few who actually cared about him. You see, Patrick, Bud said, sounding more sure of himself, I've thought this through. I didn't become sheriff by being careless. Everything I do is planned and careful. I felt anger boiling inside me. Why would you do this to a friend, Bud? For a moment, Bud looked sorry. I regret that you and Clarissa are married. It makes this harder, but I've liked her for a long time. He stepped closer to Clarissa, adding tension to the room. I decided I wanted to be with her and that I wanted to be sheriff. I go after what I want, Patrick. I glanced at Clarissa. She looked too upset to even look at me. I think the best thing, Patrick, is for you to pack a bag and find somewhere else to stay for a bit, Bud said. No way. If I leave tonight, your plans change too. I might have come into this awkward situation, but I'm not just going to walk away. If you two are going to do this, it won't be in my home. I can't stop you, but this is my house and I won't let it happen here. Patrick, I don't think you're in a place to make demands. Clarissa and I have made our decision. What I decide will happen. Well, Bud, I have a means to protect myself right here. And that means if someone's in my kitchen dressed casually, they should listen. Both Bud and Clarissa took a step back as I opened my coat. Whoa, Patrick, let's not make any rash moves. Go get your stuff, Bud. Just so you know, I'm not staying here either. I don't want to wake up in a house with my distant wife, but we're both leaving tonight. Understood? All right, Patrick, I get it. But you have to promise me you won't hurt Clarissa when I'm gone. Well, Bud, I said with a smile, the only person I'm angry with more than myself is you. So no, I won't harm the mother of my kids. But things are going to get tricky if you don't leave my house tonight. Okay, I'll grab my things now. Bud turned to head upstairs, and I followed him. As we reached the top of the stairs, he turned into the guest bedroom, which was in disarray. At least they had the decency not to disturb my own bed. I rushed to the master bedroom, gathering my clothes from the closet and dressers. Clarissa came in behind me. Bud shot her a concerned look. She closed the door and approached me, placing her hand on my shoulder. Patrick, she said, her voice shaking. I never wanted to hurt you. Stop! I shouted, pulling away from her. Don't touch me. You have no right to touch me without asking again. Any rights you had in this marriage ended the moment you chose someone else. Clarissa flinched at my words. For years, you've made excuses for why we couldn't connect. Years of distance because of your health. Well, surprise. It looks like someone else has found the answer you were missing. She stood there, tears in her eyes, while I packed and let out my anger. I knew we would have to talk about our future soon, but I was too angry for that right now. Are you proud of what you've done? I said fiercely. Does it make you happy knowing that you've upset our family? Taken a father away from our kids? Before leaving the room, I quickly checked both nightstands. When I opened the drawer on Clarissa's side, I was taken aback. I picked up a tube of medical cream and looked closely at the label. The cream was called androsterone, a treatment for low testosterone in women. I stood there, holding the tube in disbelief. I glanced at Clarissa, who covered her mouth in shock. She didn't do a good job hiding it. I had been away for the past week, and I was too hurt to speak. My look said more than I could. I stuffed everything into an old gym bag and left the bedroom. I found Bud waiting outside. "Downstairs," I said. Bud nodded and followed. When we reached the front door, Bud stopped and turned to me. "Patrick, I want your word that nothing will happen to Clarissa. She seems really upset. One of us should stay with her. We should think about her first," he said in a condescending tone. "Clarissa will be okay, Bud, but you won't be if you don't leave my house." Bud looked at me for a moment, disappointment clear on his face. Finally, he turned to Clarissa and said, "I'll call you soon, I promise." Then he tried to come closer. "Don't!" I warned. "I don't mind what you do when I'm not here, but I won't take any more disrespect from you two. I mean it. If you try to show her any affection now, there will be consequences." Reluctantly, Bud stepped back and started to walk to the door. Clarissa didn't look at either of us. As I turned to leave, I stood in the doorway and stared at her. There she was, still in her nightclothes. Anyone else might have found her attractive. But all I felt was deep emptiness. "Hey, Bud. I noticed how you used my soon-to-be ex-wife to hide behind when I walked in. Funny how you care about her now. You're really disappointing." Bud didn't say anything. He glanced at Clarissa one last time and left. The chilly night matched my mood as I walked to my car. Bud drove away slowly, making sure I wouldn't follow him, just like I knew he'd keep an eye on me. I drove the 10 miles back to Red River Falls and checked into the Skyline Drive Motel, one of the less desirable places in town. The only thing missing was an hourly rate. Reluctantly, I paid $300 for a month. It was clear that this wasn't a fancy spot. I just hoped they changed the sheets often. I dropped my bags on the bed and sank into one of the worn chairs, my feelings spilling out. All of my frustrations from the last 2 years came rushing back. The guilt about my feelings for Caroline, the endless fights with Clarissa, and the growing distance between us overwhelmed me. My dreams for a future with my family in the countryside felt so far away. All our plans were in ruins. I had been hurt by the woman I loved, and a man I once regarded as a friend. That night, sleep came in waves, helped by a bottle of cheap wine I drank from a plastic cup. I didn't drink too much, but managed to finish almost half the bottle, just enough to feel a little better. I got in the shower Sunday morning, determined to clean myself up. With all my worries and guilt, I went to Mass at St. Matthew's. I looked for a place that felt safe, hoping to find some healing and answers. My biggest worry was for my sons. Their lives were about to change, and they didn't even know it yet. I wasn't sure what would happen next or if either of us could keep the land. Bud didn't seem like someone who would farm, but I didn't know his plans. I was sure they didn't include me staying at the sheriff's department. How could he? He planned to leave his wife after the next election and then marry my wife. I needed a plan. I needed to think carefully, like a detective, and approach this as if it were an investigation. I mostly knew the who, what, and where, but I still wanted to understand the how and why. How had they kept this secret, and what were Bud's plans? Why did Clarissa agree to it, and what did she hope to gain? I remembered what Bud had said about Elmer Suggs. Elmer was a kind man who mostly lived in Red River Falls. I say mostly because he didn't have a home. He was in his late 60s, I guessed, and I had met him many times over the years when I worked for the Red River Falls Police Department. He was always friendly and never gave me any trouble. Elmer had been caught trespassing and had some minor charges for entering places without permission, usually just to find a warm spot during the cold winter. Our local shelter was small and could only help people for a few months each year. But summers are short here, and winters are long. It was a mystery how Elmer had survived for so long. One winter night, when it was 35 degrees below zero with strong winds, I had to arrest him for being out on the street. I knew that by taking him in, he would be warm, have a hot meal, and a safe place to sleep. Elmer wasn't upset with me for the arrest. He even asked if he could keep the blanket and pillow they provided. I spoke to our head jailer, Bryce Evans, and he agreed. The local magistrate dropped the charges at my request, so it wouldn't show on Elmer's record. That Sunday afternoon, I decided to drive around Red River Falls to check on Elmer. Around 5 o'clock, I finally saw him downtown, walking past the YMCA on Taylor Street. I parked my cruiser. "Hey, Elmer!" I called as I got out of the car. Elmer glanced my way but kept walking. I hurried to catch up. "Hold on, Elmer!" He stopped when he saw I wasn't going anywhere. "Afternoon, Sheriff," he said quietly. "It's okay, Elmer. You're not in trouble. I just want to chat for a bit," I assured him. "Yeah, all right. Can we go somewhere warm?" he asked in his friendly voice. "Of course, Elmer." There was a little diner called Otis's Diner right across from the YMCA. It had been there for almost 60 years. "Are you hungry, Elmer?" "You know me, Sheriff. I'm always ready to eat," he replied as he led the way. The diner was only about half full, and we found a booth that gave us some privacy. The waitress came over, and I ordered a tall coffee while Elmer asked for a hot cocoa. It was about 3 degrees outside today, which was very cold for mid-November. I figured the cocoa would be nice for Elmer. The waitress quickly returned with our drinks and was ready to take our food order. "Nothing for me, thanks," I said to the waitress. "Ain't you gonna eat anything, Sheriff?" Elmer asked. "No, but that's okay, Elmer. Go ahead and order whatever you want." Elmer smiled and ordered a bowl of chicken noodle soup, a pork tenderloin sandwich, French fries, and a large cola to drink. He politely asked if he could get dessert if he was still hungry, and I said, "Sure." The waitress took our order to the kitchen, leaving Elmer and me alone in our booth. After a moment of silence, I decided to start a conversation. "Do you have any idea why I wanted to talk to you, Elmer?" Elmer nodded but looked away. "And why is that, Elmer?" He thought for a moment before replying. "'Cause you're in some trouble with Sheriff Roberts." I sat up straighter. "Who told you that?" "Sheriff Roberts picked me up a while ago, took me for a ride. He said you were in trouble for how you were treating me when you were arrested. He also mentioned other things, but he didn't explain. He said if I didn't want to get into trouble, I needed to do what he said and say what he wanted me to say," Elmer explained. "Go on," I encouraged. "That's about it," he said. "He just said he'd keep me out of trouble if I listened to him." "Did he offer to help you with anything, Elmer, like a place to stay? Some money? Anything?" "No," he replied sadly. "Nobody ever helps me. No one helped when I got kicked out of school. Nobody helped when I came home from the Army. The only person who tried to help was you when you took me in when it was cold." I couldn't help but smile a little at that. Even though I had arrested him, Elmer could still see that I had acted out of kindness. Elmer's food arrived, and he ate in silence for the next 15 minutes, enjoying every bite. As I sat there, I wondered how someone like him finds the strength to get up each morning. He had no family in the area that I knew of. I just wasn't sure how to help him without him thinking I was doing it for my own reasons. Whatever I did, it had to be something lasting. After finishing his meal, Elmer ordered a slice of apple pie and ice cream for dessert along with another mug of cocoa. Before we left, I ordered a sandwich and a bag of chips for him to take with him. I could tell that Elmer was thankful for the meal, but felt unsure about being asked to say anything negative about me for Bud Roberts. But I also knew he was worried about what would happen if he didn't go along with things. Even though he had no home, Elmer still cared about his freedom. I offered Elmer a ride to a shelter for the night, but he turned it down. He just took the food from the diner and walked away. As I drove back to the hotel, I thought about him and how I could help. Elmer hadn't had a fair chance in life. Red River Falls had around 30,000 people, but only about 150 or 200 were black. That shouldn't matter, but we all know the world isn't perfect. Well, except for Bud and Clarissa, it seemed. Elmer had dropped out of high school. He had been without a home and in trouble with the law for much of his life. He had never asked for help ever since he returned from what he called the jungle. The jungle? Sure. Elmer was in his late 60s, which meant he was the right age to have served in Vietnam. If Elmer was a Vietnam veteran, I might find ways to assist him. I made a note that night to call the Mason County Veterans Affairs Office first thing in the morning. If anyone could help Elmer, it was Rosetta Dirksen at the VA office. That night, I called my friends, pretending I was still at the conference in Minneapolis. It was clear Clarissa hadn't said anything to them. They had enjoyed their weekend with cousins, which I appreciated. I finished off the rest of the wine I had from the night before and fell asleep thinking about how to help Elmer. I slept surprisingly well. In the morning, I woke up with a bad headache, which was odd since I hadn't had one the day before. Still, I was determined to take charge of my life. Helping Elmer Suggs was the first step. I arrived at the VA office right at 8 o'clock on Monday morning and caught Rosetta as she was starting her day. She had no appointments until 9:30, and I asked her urgently for a moment of her time. When I mentioned Elmer Suggs, she quickly let me in. "I've been trying to find Elmer for years," Rosetta said. I actually have a disability compensation and pension claim for him. He's finally been approved for all his benefits." Hearing those words was wonderful. "What kind of benefits will he get?" I asked. "Elmer is a Purple Heart recipient. He's also been rated with a 100% disability for PTSD, Agent Orange exposure, and several shrapnel injuries. The claim is over 10 years old, but he will at least receive back benefits for 1 year." "Not to sound greedy," I asked, "but how much will that be?" "Since he's rated 100% disabled, he should receive about $3,000 a month in disability benefits. With a retroactive payment covering the past year, he was set to receive his first check for around $36,000. He also qualified for complete medical benefits through the VA, giving him nearly free health care for his service-related issues and lower costs for everything else, along with his Medicare benefits. All of this could provide a secure future for Elmer. As a decorated veteran, he would have a steady income for the rest of his life. This meant he would have no problem affording a place to live and enough food. Rosetta mentioned that employees from the VA and the American Legion would help him transition from living on the streets to a safe, comfortable setting. After nearly an hour in Rosetta's office, I felt excited and hopeful. If I could help make all this happen, it would move Elmer away from Bud's influence and into a better situation. Rosetta encouraged me to find Elmer and bring him to her office today. For the next 2 hours, I searched for him, starting at the YMCA where we had met the night before. Eventually, I located him at the Salvation Army's adult daycare center, which he wasn't supposed to be at, but they kindly allowed him to come in for free coffee and a bit of warmth. I did my best to convince Elmer to join me. I brought him to the VA office just before noon. Rosetta had arranged her afternoon schedule to help him. We spent the day in her office organizing his medical care, health benefits, and setting up a bank account for his disability payments. We also found him a lovely one-bedroom apartment ready for him to move into by the end of the week. Rosetta even arranged for him to have a complete set of medical exams at the VA hospital in Minneapolis, which included various health screenings. He would need a ride to the hospital, and I was more than happy to give him one. We stayed with Elmer throughout the rest of the afternoon and evening. Rosetta arranged for him to stay at the shelter for a few days until he could move into his new apartment. When I returned to my car, I saw I had missed several calls from Bud Roberts. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to call him back. "Are you planning on coming back to work?" he asked. "That depends. Are you going to stop meddling in my personal life?" I replied. "I'm warning you, Patrick. You have a lot more to lose than I do. You might not save your marriage, but you can at least keep your job and support your kids." "Seems like there's a lot of might-be's with you, Bud. Right now, I don't trust you at all. You say I have a lot to lose, but I've decided to act like I have nothing to lose. You've put a risky situation in front of yourself. You might want to be careful, Bud." I could hear him laugh. "What do you think you have that I should be worried about, Patrick?" I smiled as I replied, "I've got Elmer Suggs." And then I ended the call. I spent the rest of the week helping Elmer get settled. The local Vietnam veterans group heard about Elmer and took him under their care. When they found out how long he had been without a home and support, they promised to ensure he would always have both. It was great to see them come together for one of their own. On Thursday morning, I picked up Elmer from the shelter. He looked like a new man. He was clean, had a fresh haircut, and wore new clothes that his fellow veterans had bought for him. Elmer was so happy during the ride to Minneapolis. It had been years since he had been outside of Red River Falls. He only had a few teeth left, but part of the plan was for him to get new dentures. We spent Thursday afternoon and all of Friday going through his exams and appointments. I also took some time for myself during my visit to Minneapolis. I went to the Mall of America to buy gifts for Nick and Jake. Elmer stayed overnight in a medical dorm for out-of-town patients, and I got a room at a Best Western near the airport, close to the VA hospital. On Saturday morning, Elmer and I drove back to Red River Falls. Elmer was quiet since the dentist had removed his remaining teeth. Soon, he would have a brand new set of dentures, and he was excited to smile fully for the first time in years. I dropped Elmer off at his new apartment, which his fellow veterans prepared for him while we were away. They really went all out, providing him with a nice bed, kitchen table and chairs, a small sofa, a recliner, a dresser, and equipping his kitchen with everything he could need. Some items were used, but likely better than anything Elmer had seen in a long time. They also filled his fridge while he was away. A big group of veterans and their wives were there to greet us when we arrived. Elmer invited everyone to stay for coffee as his first official guests. I stayed for a while and got a chance to chat with Rick Krause, the commander of the local VFW and a fellow Vietnam veteran. I asked Rick to help keep Elmer company for a bit until I could take care of a few things. Rick didn't ask too many questions. He simply mentioned that a group of Vietnam veterans was planning a 10-day trip to Vietnam in a few weeks. Rick was determined to make sure Elmer could join the trip. As I left Elmer's apartment and stepped into the hallway, I heard him call out, "Hey! What's up, Elmer?" I replied. "Do you need something?" I asked. Elmer struggled to speak, still having gauze in his mouth after a dental procedure. "I just want to say thanks, Sheriff. No one has done what you're doing for me now." "No, Elmer," I said. "Thank you. Thank you for serving our country. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize." Elmer nodded again and went inside to be with his guests. I spent Saturday night at the Skyline Drive Motel. On Sunday morning, I slept in, attended a late mass, and treated myself to brunch before heading back to the farm, pretending I was just returning from a conference. The boys were overjoyed to see me after 2 weeks away. Clarissa was surprised and looked like she might burst with joy when I came through the front door and exclaimed, "I'm home!" The rest of the afternoon and evening, I spent time with Clarissa and the boys, trying to keep things normal. It seemed that Clarissa hadn't told them what was happening, which was probably for the best. We enjoyed putting together Lego sets I had bought for them. Since they both loved Star Wars, I got Nick a huge Lego Millennium Falcon and Jake a Lego Death Star, both with nearly 3,000 pieces. Building the Millennium Falcon took all the way up to the boys' bedtime, so we'd have to save the other set for another night. After the boys were asleep, I prepared to leave when Clarissa came over to talk. "So," she began, "how is this going to work? We can't keep going on like this forever, Patrick." "It will be like this until I decide otherwise, Clarissa." "Come on, Patrick. You know Bud won't accept this, and neither will I. You have to think about the boys and yourself." I grabbed my coat to leave, but turned back to her. "Maybe you should reconsider what you believe Bud is capable of and focus on what I know I can do." Then I walked out. Hey listeners, if you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss out on what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video with Queen Cheating Tales.